Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's meeting of the Budget and Performance Committee. Can I just remind everyone to make sure your phones are switched to silent mode to avoid any interruptions. First order of business, can I ask our clerk, Hannah Barlow, if any apologies have been received?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Assemblymember Wilson, and Assemblymember Baker is attending remotely on Zoom.
Okay. Declaration of interest. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 2 and ask if members have any other interest to declare? Excellent. Can I ask the committee to note the ongoing actions from its previous meetings and the additional correspondence received? Excellent. That brings us now to our main item of business this morning, which is a discussion on the 2026-27 Greater London Authority Group budget. And for that, I would like to welcome our first panel this morning, which is Faye Hammond, who is the Chief Finance Officer at the GLA, and Elliot Ball, who's the Interim Group Director. Interim Director of Group Finance and Performance at the GLA. Took me 2 goes, but we got there. Morning, Elliot, and morning, Faye. So let me kick off with the first question to you, Faye. Obviously, since you were last here, we've now had the settlement. So what is your assessment of the impact of the 17th of December provisional local government finance and policing settlements on the finances of the GLA Group?
Good morning, everybody. You say unusually we come into this committee with more information than we had last year. When we were here last year, we only had the draft budget. Now we've got some more information on our funding levels. So what the announcements that happened in December showed us that we had, so I'm just making sure I can see properly my glasses, £155 million more than we had expected in terms of our draft budget control total that we'd given out to as part of the July process. If you take account of the national insurance, take that out of that picture, that's an increase of 138.8 million. What that does show is that over time that increase will reduce. So by the third year, 28-29, that goes down to 23-25 as transitional arrangements kick in. So from that point of view, it was good to know that we had that increase, but I'm still quite cautious around that position given the fact that we don't have an NDR1 returns and there's continued risks around business rate levels. So just sort of add a bit of caution there. In addition to that, we had the police settlement, which was also more favourable to the tune of £112 million than we'd put out originally. But what we're not clear on is whether or not the national insurance is within that figure or not. So we need a bit more detail around what that means. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. The other information was that it is possible to, as we spoke about a moment ago, the police precept, the maximum that it's possible to put it up to is £15, which is more than we've got in our draft budget, although decisions around that haven't yet been made. There's still information that we don't know, so we still don't have an NDR1 returns. We still don't know about the NICC grant for police. We've got preceding December, we did also have our integrated settlement information nearly complete, but not quite complete. So we've got part of those processes, but not all of them. I'm not sure if I've missed anything out, Elliot. Did I miss anything? Great. Okay. Yep. So it was more positive than we had anticipated. I think. Did you want me to comment on that? I don't know if there's some more.
Comment on what, sorry?
On the fact it's more positive. I'm happy to keep talking. I don't know if you've got some subsequent questions.
So as partly, so what new information is there? I suppose that's really what my question was. What new information do we have since December? And I suppose connected to that, the big topic, I suppose, or the big issue last time was around the uncertainty, the multiple different uncertainties. Some of those obviously have resolved because one of them was that we hadn't yet at that time had a budget because it was so late. That has now happened, and we didn't have the provisional settlements, which were not expected but have now happened. But then some of the other uncertainties were things like business. Obviously, there's the fair funding review. We do now have the results of that, which is obviously very mixed. So we've seen for London boroughs, there's a huge divergence now between particularly inner London, not thinking of any outer London boroughs in particular, but some outer London boroughs have done okay, some have done not so okay.
Yeah.
Where is the GLA in terms of that, in terms of the funding settlement?
I think I would say that when you think about from our initial starting point, there was a lot of noise about London having less funding, it being redistributed. So I would think that we're in a better position than perhaps we'd hoped that we would be. And I think some of the reason for that is that from that time period is we did a lot of work with government to explain that the growth that we received as an organisation is used for police, it's used for TfL, it's used for fire, and I don't think that understanding was there, the impact that would have on London should that reduce. I think that was a success of our process, that we've got to that point having, if we think about when we were at the beginning of the process, the end of the process, we were able to clearly communicate how that money was used and why it's important to retain it. So I think that's helpful to, that's part of that process.
Just so I can understand, so we were expecting it to get worse, and it's better than we thought it would be, but is it better than it was or worse than it was? So is it not? Let me try that.
Yeah, it's better. Yeah, so it's better than it was.
So it's actually better than it was,
yeah.
Or is it worse than it was, but just not by as much as we thought it would be, if that's not too confusing?
The draft budget, if you think that our draft budget was our stated position of what our expectation was, then we're £155 million better than our draft budget position.
Okay. And the other big uncertainty, which you partly touched on, was around business rates. So the fair funding review obviously partly is about the revenue funding for local authorities, and it's partly obviously this question about the growth element of business rates. Is there any more information about where that might be landing?
In terms of the growth, you mean?
Well, in terms of we get, what is it, about 3 billion in business rates in total.
Yeah.
And the worry back in the autumn was that we might not be getting that much again. And you mentioned the fact that you've been lobbying government and saying this money would make a massive hole in TfL, it would make a massive hole in fire brigade, police, which they weren't aware of, which is a bit of a surprise. But anyway, I'm glad they are now aware of it. We don't yet have the numbers on business rates, though, do we?
We don't have the numbers for NNDR absolutely till January, but there's a level of assurance in the fact that the government stated what our minimum level of fair funding should be as an organisation. So there's a level of assurance around that, albeit that we've got some risks in terms of the business rate position. I don't know, Ellie, you wanted to comment on that?
Yeah, just to expand on what faces. So what we've done in the consultation budget published in December was to a large extent assume no change to the previous system. And compared to that baseline, the control totals that dropped out of making that assumption, we're now potentially, notwithstanding NNDR1s, potentially roughly 138 better off after you account for the cost of the ENIC grant. Your question about growth.
Sorry, that's 138 across the whole group.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct. Your question about growth, I think what you're alluding to is that in the previous system, the GLA group had accumulated lots of business rates revenue, which is a consequence of the retained business rates growth regime. That was what was one of our biggest concerns that would be at risk in the reset. We'd estimated that the revenue at risk was over 400 million. So that was the big concern, and that's what we were also worried about earlier in the year. And then we went through the process which Fairs explained to help the government understand that retained growth wasn't a luxury, it was used to keep Londoners safe and moving. Of that over 400 million retained growth, the documents published in December by the government, and there was a raft of them, explained that they had decided that London, so for other authorities, that retained growth was put back in the system and then redistributed according to the new mechanisms. The GLA's over 400 million growth, 280 of that, the GLA was allowed to retain as part of our baseline. So that was quite an unusual and favourable element of the government's settlement from December for the GLA. The balance is put back in the system and redistributed, but as with all the changes announced in December by the government, it's phased in over 3 years. So of that 400 million, odd, a bit more, 280 is back in our baseline, and the bit that we lose is phased out over 3 years. But within all of the changes that were made, there's lots of ups and downs. And so, like Faye's been saying, when you net off all those ups and downs, looks like in 26, 27, notwithstanding NNDR1s that could do lots of different things, there looks potentially to be an upside compared to the control totals.
Okay. And then, as you say, we won't know until the end of, I think you said the end of January. Did you mean when is it we get our business rates returned? Is that end of
January?
End of January. And obviously that is traditionally when we get unexpectedly and completely by surprise a couple of £100 million of extra money that we definitely weren't expecting, and the Mayor has not thought about how he will spend, but very quickly seems to find a way to spend it. Is the changes to the business rates regime, is there any reason to think that won't happen again this year?
I think there's...
Yeah, go on, you start.
Well, so I hear what you're saying. There has been surpluses in the past that have...
I think about 10 years, roughly.
We are nervous this year because NNDR1s are, real numbers. So the settlement that's released in December is a hypothetical baseline decided by MHCLG. NNDR1s are real numbers that are what the boroughs expect to collect over the course of the next year. There's several reasons that we're a bit more nervous this year. Firstly, the magnitude of the changes and the complexity of the changes introduced for government create lots of challenges for boroughs when they implement those over 26/7. They have to make assumptions about how well they'll implement those and how much money they'll get back in as a consequence over the course of the year that follows. It's entirely possible that boroughs will be a bit cautious when they make those assumptions because of the complexity of the changes they're dealing with. Another element of risk and uncertainty is that this year, not only are they implementing the business rate system changes, there's a major revaluation of all businesses that pay business rates. And some of those revaluations are quite high, and there is a good chance that the people on the receiving end of high valuations will challenge. And so it's possible that if you just applied those revaluations arithmetically, the number you'd come up with may be higher than the number that actually materialises after businesses have, appealed against those valuations. So there's two core elements of risk there that might be reflected in the NNDR ones that come in at the end of January and cause us sort of caution.
Yeah, I mean, when I heard about the hospitality trade in particular, they seem to be very alarmed at the increases that they're seeing, and their position seems to be, well, this money simply doesn't exist, we cannot pay it. And I suppose that's what you're alluding to, is if either they challenge it successfully or if the business just goes to the wall and therefore it's an empty property that doesn't pay any business rates, that's an additional downside uncertainty that would materialise presumably
Correct.
over the course of the year.
That's the reason, one of the two main reasons we're cautious about the NNDR ones.
Okay. And so in that case then, so it sounds like we'll get some clarity at the end of January or maybe early February when the NNDRs are compiled and published. But actually then there's a question mark over that over the whole course of the year in terms of how businesses actually react to whatever the changes are.
So we need a reserve, yeah. I don't know if I'm still on. Yeah. So obviously that's why us holding a business rate reserve and ensuring the level of that's appropriate once we've got the NNDR1 information in, we'll have a little bit more clarity on.
Understood. Okay.
So we're cautious. We're obviously, the settlement was positive, but we're cautious, I guess, is what summary.
Okay. Assemblymember Harani.
Thank you. Just on the integrated assessment and fair funding review, how will it impact the Mayor's ability to deliver manifesto priorities, such as delivering on the 40,000 council homes and ending rough sleeping?
So in the settlement, we also had information on the rough sleeping grant, which is continuing at the same level as it has done in previous years. So that supports that rough sleeping priority continuing. So I think that would probably, from a funding point of view, that's the information that we have at the moment.
And so just in terms of, Elliot, what you've mentioned about the business rate returns at the end of January, so what contingency plans are in place if it's not what you expect? Or have you just expected zero in your budget and it's there to spend on additional items if it comes in?
So that's exactly why we have the business rates reserve. We've got something called business rates reserve, the BRR, which has a target balance. That target balance happens to be set by, is determined by FAO, CFO and the Mayor's Office to be 7.5% of our expected business rates revenue, which works out this year to be about 107 million in 26-27. And that business rates reserve is over that target balance according to the consultation budget figures in 26-27. And that reserve exists to give us a buffer in the event that returns are lower.
Okay, and just moving on to the budget process. So what are the key challenges to the process this year, and are they achieving the intended outcomes?
Sorry, say that again.
What are the key? First of all, what are the key challenges to the budget process this year?
Well, Faye might want to comment as well, but the uncertainty that we faced in funding has been, has created a challenge. The macroeconomic environment has been uncertain, and obviously there were revisions by the OBR in the budget that was published at the end of November, and that's posed some challenges in the assumptions that we make associated with tax revenues due to growth and the impact of inflation and interest rates and so on. I think, they're the two challenges in the process. And then, the financial stability or sustainability challenges faced by the functional bodies has been something they've been grappling in their budget submissions to us with.
Okay, and what are the key differences in terms of, or changes in the process this year compared to previous years?
So if I can just comment on that. So sort of from an initial point of view, I think when we set that, when we set the draft budget in July, it was really thinking about what that figure needed to be. Although we set it as Elliot had said at steady state, we did have a conversation about whether that was the right number to use, because of course we didn't know at that point what the level of uncertainty is. So from that point of view, that was kind of a different way of thinking, because obviously I'm always thinking about what could happen. So that was a change in the process. We steady state, but that was still a conversation. And what we did also have to have is like sort of almost side conversation with each of the functioning bodies, which said this is what we've put in our draft budget, but we don't know until December. So you need to start thinking about what, say, you know, if something happens and we've got less money, we need to think about what those savings might look like. So that's a change in the process from what's happened in the past. You know, the GLA budget itself has had a reduction, you know, that's a sort of specific area that had a reduction in its funding saving, which we haven't had in previous years. And so we've undertaken a different process there in terms of the budget saving process. In terms of functioning bodies, I think they've been pretty much same as always in terms of, you know, thinking about savings and what they might come up with. But that is the fundamental ones. And of course, what's also changed is our conversations with government that we've had this year that we haven't had in the past, and participating in those reforms and influencing and trying to make a difference in that reforms. And of course, all of this is going on in the BAU, kind of, if you like, the basic budget and integrated settlement, but also the lobbying we've done on things like Thamesmead, all happening at the same time.
So I'm just trying to, maybe it's unfair to ask you this question, Faye, because in previous years you weren't part of the process. Maybe I'll turn to Elliot. So what Faye just mentioned about the ability to negotiate or have conversations with government, is that something that happened before? Is it completely a new thing that's happened in the last?
Yeah, there's been a lot more opportunities to discuss at a working level and a sort of mayor's office level with government over the last year than we've seen in previous years.
Okay. Okay, fine. That's helpful to know as well. And just now going back to Faye, so you mentioned that there was a change this year in terms of teams looking and trying to look at savings, but now you're in the opposite position, if you like, because you've got more, well, it looks like you've got more money coming in than you expected. So have you been now changing that conversation to look at what items of growth that the GLA group might want to look at, or teams might want to look at, or is it? So how are you handling or how do you envisage handling that additional funding coming through?
Yeah, well, of course, as we set the draft budget, not all of the functioning bodies had a balanced budget at that point in time. So that's something for the Mayor's office to consider when they set their budget position. And all those kind of conversations are happening currently with the Mayor's office and different functioning bodies around what some of those, what this new funding settlement means for functioning bodies and for the GLA. How much of that will be reflected in the draft budget, which you see in a couple of weeks, is to be, you know, we'll kind of see. So those are still live conversations at the moment in terms of what that might look like. Obviously, like I said, in terms also, we, from a CFO point of view, think about the cautionary side of the NNDR ones at in the same time, or making those decisions, knowing that those the NNDR ones are still to come. So those conversations are, yeah, you know, the Mayor's thinking about that now. Okay. But we don't have you know, it's not something, I guess it'll become more transparent at the draft budget stage, how much of what we've spoken about here is translated into draft budget.
Okay, and in terms of this budget process in particular, you had a bit of a drive on value for money as well. Question to you, Elliot. So to what extent do you feel the functional bodies have delivered on the Mayor's budget requirement to detail that approach in terms of value for money? And how useful have you found this approach in embedding value for money within the 26-27 budget? And I suppose I'm just going to add onto that question because obviously it seems like we do have the additional funding, and if things have been found through that value for money process, it doesn't mean that it's not worth doing them if there's a better way of doing it. So is that very much on the table as well? So Elliot first.
If you want.
Yeah. So I think it's a really good demonstration how a budget process can be the catalyst for positive change in terms of efficiency savings. So absolutely, where efficiency savings have been found, whether it's in the GLA budget or Met budget or TfL's budget, they will still be capitalised on or utilised on. The ones that I can think of, obviously GLA budget still to come here, but there are a number of efficiency savings expected from the GLA budget. The ones in MOPAC, there are a number. I think there's at least £20 million from efficiency savings in non-staff in looking at contracts, for example. use of technologies, a couple that come to mind. So we do know that those efficiency savings are being driven out. I'm trying to think of the ones from, I think one of the interesting ones from TfL, I'm not sort of over the detail of this, but thinking about bus costs and their operating model, and so how they can be more efficient in their bus operating model, cutting delays by, you know, working out which streets are being shut and having better communication, which means they need less buses to go around. So there's a number of, those are examples that I've heard about in terms of efficiency savings that have been driven out through this process.
Okay. I think that's it from me. Yeah.
Okay, actually, before we move on to the sort of section by section bit, I just wanted to, you said earlier, Faye, you mentioned about the employer NI cost impact, and actually it occurred to me that do you have a sense of what the total is of that, and whether, because I think the government initially were making us whole, but now presumably that just becomes a net impact, so maybe they give us some extra money, but it's not specifically for that. Do you know roughly how much that extra employer NI is costing us?
The grant level was around, in total, if you're including police and TfL, and the money the JLA got was in the region of about 50 to 60 million last year, but I haven't got to hand if there's any increase above that. I haven't got that information.
Yeah, last year's ENIC grant was 18.8 million for the group except MOPAC and 44 million for MOPAC. That 44 million covered the costs in MOPAC. The 18.8 million that was for the rest of the group was a bit of a shortfall compared to what the cost was. I haven't got updated figures for 26-27 for the cost of ENIC. And that grant doesn't exist anymore. It's been wrapped up in the new business rates system. So
otherwise, that's just a cost that we now bear.
It's just now part of the cost
business
baseline.
As usual.
And, you know, the funding includes.
But it sounds like then I mean, just as an estimate, if you take, what was it, 44 and 18, you said, so
That's right,
obviously
yeah.
the total of that takes you to, I don't know,
62-ish.
60, 70-ish,
Yeah.
well, with some inflation, because you said it was a bit of a shortfall. So presumably the answer is it's somewhere between 60 and 70 million a year, something like that.
Yeah, probably. But like I say, I haven't got the specific figures. But,
Okay.
yeah.
That would be useful to know. Would you be able to let us know what
Okay, we
that
can write
cost
back on
burden is, effectively? Only because, obviously, it's great to announce we've got some additional funding, but if the additional funding is in part just netting off the additional costs that we have, obviously we need to make sure we're looking at a net position rather than just a slightly misleading gross position.
Can we have that itemised as well, please? And can you include in that the MOPAC and the LFB? I'm not sure if they paid the fire brigades NI anyway.
Yeah, the Fire
did.
Brigade got a share of
So
the ENIC
when you
grant.
send it to the committee, can you itemise all of those, that they're not getting any more?
By functional body, you mean? So the
Yeah,
impact
yeah,
on
beg
fire
your pardon,
brigade,
yeah.
police, TfL.
So we can itemise the estimated cost of the ENIC increase by functional body. There is no ENIC grant now to itemise by functional body.
Yep. I think that's what we meant. So what is the cost burden? And if we could, I think what Assemblymember Hall is asking is if we could see what that is rather than just a sort of umbrella total.
Yeah.
But because presumably when you calculate it, you'll calculate it by functional body. So
Yeah.
if we could have that breakdown, that would be very useful.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, I think I don't see any other indications. So that takes us now onto our first sort of topic area, which is GLA Mayor's budget, which is Assemblymember Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question for Faye. The government announced 6 months ago that funding for free school meals will be extended to all pupils on universal credit from September 2026. Why doesn't the consultation budget note this or attempt to quantify the financial impact?
I could have to check the timing, actually, so I'm not sure if the timing-wise I could quite clearly answer that. In terms of the impact of the free school meals, what will happen in reality is that schools will receive funding directly from the government for the meals that they'll be funded from the government, and then they'll be claiming less from the GLA in terms of universal free school meals that we pay, and we do expect that to be a significant number. What happens at the moment is that for the universal free school meals, £90 odd million is paid from just roughly from core business rates, and the remainder is funded from reserves, and we anticipate in the future, as part of this process, that we're unlikely to need to draw down reserves in future to fund the balance anymore once this kicks in, and so therefore the reserve balance will be protected or grow over time, but fundamentally the core of the universal free school meals will be funded from our base budget going forward.
Okay, and what would the... I sort of heard the number there, but didn't quite get the actual nail down.
The current drawdown from reserves for universal free school meals is around about 50 to 60 million, is it something
Yeah,
like
it
that?
rises each year. It's 55.
Okay, so
rising
we
to
won't
about
be
60.
spending that 50 to 60. Excellent, that's useful to know.
But that effectively is it will mean we're no longer drawing down those funds from reserves, though. It doesn't free up core base budget to do anything with. The positive news is the free school meals is funded permanently on an ongoing basis from GLA core budget, which obviously the mayor's...
Yeah, that's useful, but of course the mayor was always going to be spending those reserves, so that's money which he was intending to spend anyway, so it's been baked into the system to an extent, so there is still been what might be termed as a loose ball available in terms of additional spending, perhaps. Has the mayor identified any ways in which he may be willing to spend those reserves that he was intending to spend anyway?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. I think those are the questions. The second question has been answered, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Assembly Member Hall.
Well, my colleagues asked most of my questions. Is it a case that you genuinely don't know what he might be spending this money on, or is it, and I do understand it's a case that you do know, but you are not at liberty to say, which I also understand. Which is it?
I actually don't know, which is quite a good position to be in as a local officer sitting here. So I'm not aware of any commitment that the mayor has got, or neither have had any conversations about commitment from those.
Well, we differ there. I would have thought that your chief finance officer should be the first one you discuss when you are going to be spending this sort of money. Because if things are pulled out of a hat, then we see things like the free school meals that was put in place in such a bad way in the first place, with money wasted all over the place. If that was because the chief financial officer wasn't consulted, then that shows it doesn't work. So you and I will have to disagree. Whilst you can look us in the face and say, I genuinely don't know, I would think so near to the budget, it's damn ridiculous that you don't know what he might be doing with it. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you. I'm not sure if the previous speaker was just saying that it was a waste of money to feed children across London, but maybe I've misinterpreted what she just said.
You know damn well that's not what I was saying,
okay.
So
right.
Don't play politics with that.
So just to clarify then, more of a financial question, Faye. So at the start you gave some figures, £155 million extra for the group. And then the net amount, once you take out the employees' national insurance contributions, are about 138.8. So circa about 16 million in terms of the contribution towards national insurance contributions. Does that 138.8 include the circa £50 million that we're saving as part of the government announcement around expansion of free school meals for primary school children?
No, they're two completely different things.
So whilst I appreciate you've talked about that money coming out of reserves, that is another additional net benefit to the bottom line, effectively.
It is, but of course reserves are there for, you need to be considered in terms of an overall reserve strategy and ensuring that's sustainable position. So that's part of our overall reserve strategy.
Of course, but I don't know, last year whether you contributed towards reserves, I guess sometimes that saves you having to make an additional contribution towards the reserves within the budget.
Effectively, it is a net benefit, absolutely.
Yeah. And so in terms of that, the funding therefore, so potentially it is still an additional net benefit to the overall bottom line then?
It's a reduction in our overall level of reserve drawdown. From an accounting point of view, there's a difference between ongoing budget that we've got, which is the 155 million that they reduce over time, versus reserves, which are once they're used, they're spent. So from a CFO
absolutely,
point of view,
I mean, going back to the point about the business rate reserves, the general reserves, which is presumably where the funding came from, are you happy with the level it is at the moment, or are you seeking to rebalance that, increase that figure as part of the current budget proposals?
We'll certainly, as part of our reserve strategy thinking, make sure that we consider the NNDR1 and the risks and the levels that we're needing to handle in the future. So that will be part of our thinking. I think colleagues are trying to understand whether or not we're going to have a sort of spend up of our reserves now that this has happened, and that is not my understanding, no.
Okay, thank you very much.
Assembly Member Georgiou.
Given that the government has widened the net now for the number of children that are eligible for free school meals from central government funding, so I think we've got universal credit, pupil premium, plus those who are already eligible. Has there been any sort of impact assessment? Have you been asked to do any impact assessment from the Mayor, any of his advisors or his team to say, right, these are the kids that are now the net beneficiaries? Or the families, I should say.
Not that I'm aware of. That doesn't mean that conversation hasn't happened between Mayor's office and the colleagues leading that piece of work.
I mean, I asked the question because from a budgetary perspective and looking at value for money, and by the way, before colleagues over there start getting all excited as they normally do, you know, I think all groups have expressed support for free school meals on the Assembly, so that's not up for debate. But I do wonder if now the net has widened so much in terms of government funding, we're essentially paying for free school meals for millionaires, aren't we? I mean, I'm just trying to think of if you're going to continue offering the scheme, which no one is disputing whether you should or you shouldn't do. It's just more, I'd be curious if that impact assessment ever did arise. But you're saying you're not aware, not to say that it hasn't happened, but whether that work has gone on at any point.
Yeah, I'm not aware. I'm sure there will have been an assessment since I've been. I'm sure there've been 8 assessments since I've been here about the positive value of free school meals for children in London, and the fact that it takes away that stigma of all children being able to have free school meal.
No, I know you're giving us the Mayor's line. I appreciate that, but I think what I'm trying to, that wasn't the question that I asked an Assembly Member Mahfouz. As I told you, you'd get excited. He is. Look at him. My question was, and if and when this does exist, if it ever comes in the future, please do let the committee know, which was specifically, now that the government has allocated the free funding money, the free school meal money for those on universal credit, which are the kids that are left within that net that we're still providing free school meals for? So I'm saying, if that, once again, you know, they can't help themselves because they don't like hearing questions that actually, you know, are productive. So if we could get that report in the future, if it exists, Faye, that'd be very helpful.
Okay, thank you.
If it exists, I'm not saying it does. Thank you. Yeah.
Just, if I could just clarify something on this, actually. So when we were here last, the position was that there was a £19.3 million deficit in the GLA Mayor budget, and that in turn prompted the Chief Officer to, I want to be careful how I phrase this, open the question of whether that might potentially lead to staff redundancies. There have been town hall meetings and all staff emails and so on. This suggests that there's something like £50 million saving to the cost of free school meals, which is a big part of the GLA Mayor budget, which by my math puts us at least 30 million into the black. So does that have implications for that ongoing staff position?
So as we set out clearly when we reported in November the budget gap, which was 19.2 million, that we would be looking to fill that through, should it come to pass, through looking at options around efficiencies, for example, as much as we could, and thinking about our strategic role and where we were having the most impact. And that work around those options has continued. And so when we set the draft budget, we are still expecting to look at where those options have driven out or identified savings, they're still expected to have a level of savings from the GLA budget, particularly where we have efficiency savings, for example. So that's the current.
But you understand, like, if you put yourself in the shoes of you are a member of staff, but a less senior member of staff, let's say, who's not quite as close to all of this, who's been at those meetings and heard those concerns, and who now looks at a budget that had a £19 million or 19.3, I think it was, deficit, but has suddenly gained, at least in this respect, 50 million-ish, 40, 50, then that puts it well into the black. And so they might wonder whether that whole programme just can be knocked on the head and the uncertainty's gone.
So the £50 million worth of free school meal funding comes from business rate funding as opposed to from the GLA budget itself. So just wanted to make that...
Sorry, perhaps let me be clear what I mean then. So the Mayor's been allocating, in rough terms, about £140 million a year for free school meals. The government, and he's topping up from, obviously, there are some students who are already getting free school meals funded by government. The government funding has increased, and so that reduces the gap that the Mayor is filling with his free school meals programme, and we think that's to the tune of about £40 or £50 million. So that would mean that the Mayor's free school meal budget allocation would drop from about 140-ish to about 90-ish. So in a budget with a deficit of 19 million, that puts you about 30 million in the black, doesn't it, just in rough terms?
Yeah, I think the difference there is that of the £150 million of free school meals, 60% of that is funded from reserves. So if you were trying to kind of, there's a difference between the reserve element and the in-year budget element. So the in-year budget element's now fully funded. The reserves will be less drawdown on reserves. But the question I think you're trying to get at is that, now that we're in a different funding position, are we having a rethink on some of these budget gaps and some of the actions that we're taking? And I think what I'd like to say fundamentally, because where these savings driving out value for money or a catalyst for change or thinking about things differently and bringing about change is able to be effected without, with efficiency gains, then we will still take those. We will still take those opportunities or maximise opportunities to do so. Obviously, the draft budget hasn't been agreed yet, so we'll have that in detail on the 15th of January. But I think we were clear in November that we'll be looking to make efficiency savings in what we do in our thinking, which includes that. Yeah.
Okay. Assemblymember Roberts, it's still on this topic, I think.
Same topic, yes, please. It's just regarding, I think what you said earlier is that this whether it's 50 or 60, which I think you said in my response, or the 40-50 that we've got in our papers, is that the money which would then go back into the reserves now forms part of the reserve strategy. Is that correct?
Yeah, effectively, you'll end up having more reserves, and then we will need to think about what a level of reserves are that we hold, what the risks are that we hold as part of that. And I'll always be thinking of a CFO around the sustainability of using reserves on an ongoing basis. So all that kind of thinking will need to be part of that.
Yeah, because then that sort of makes me sort of slight alarm bells ringing about the fact that we then have somebody who can be acting quite independently of the Chief Financial Officer, who can be making decisions on the reserves without consulting you, which will necessarily have an impact on your reserve strategy. That's no way to run a business, is it?
Yeah, so absolutely, I would be consulted with and be talked and influenced and have conversations with the Mayor's Office regarding reserves. In actual fact, in regard to the GLA reserves, we've completely reviewed the GLA reserves and put together some proposals for the Mayor's Office, which is under consideration and will be reflected in the GLA's reserve strategy, which you will see when the report's published in March. So as an example, at the moment, the GLA's general reserve is 10 million. You'll see from the budget papers, and it should be nearer 5. So we're looking at, so that we have got proposals on the GLA's Mayor's reserve strategy, which we've talked about with the Mayor, we've put to the Mayor's Office in regard to the GLA specific reserves, and that will be all reflected in the budget report that comes out in March.
Thank you. And if I can just something which Elliot was saying earlier was, did you say that the intended business rates sort of the base level that you're looking for is about 107 million?
The business rates reserve target balance is 107 million, roughly.
And you indicated that at the moment it's above that?
In the consultation budget, it was above that in 26-27.
How much, roughly? Just to refresh my memory.
Let me just get the exact figures so I don't... So the consultation budget forecast that the business rates reserve balance in 26-27 would be 199 million at the end of the year.
199. Was that sort of built in with the 40, 50, 50, 60, which
that
was going to
reserve?
So that could rise to about a quarter of a billion.
Well,
once this money goes back in? Because,
£250 million.
well,
Not in
199 plus
26,
an extra 50 going in, because you're not spending that 50, so that will be going back into the business reserves. Or am I getting terribly muddled?
It will be an upside in the BRR.
Okay, so we could be looking at 250 million.
Potentially. I mean, all of these figures are
Future
subject to decisions yet to be taken, and they'll be announced.
Value
in the draft
investments
budget.
can go down as well as read the small print. But theoretically, we're looking at £250 million sitting there in the business rates reserve pot.
It will increase by a material sum, thanks to Universal Free School Meals, yeah.
Thank you.
Figure to be determined.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we now don't see any other indications, so we're now moving on to our next section, which is Transport for London. Assembly Member Polanski.
Good morning and Happy New Year. Sorry, excuse me. Faye, how is the Mayor's bus and trams fare freeze going to be paid for with the uncertainty and funding gap?
Did you say bus?
Bus and trams fare
Yeah.
freeze.
So I think we've been clear that the GLA is will be paying for that freeze, which is until the 1st of July. We're expecting that to be funded from reserves, because obviously it's a one-off cost at the moment.
And that's all coming from reserves?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
From GLA reserves.
It makes sense. Thanks, Chair.
GLA as in business rate reserves, actually,
Correct.
isn't it? Business rate, sorry, to be clear. Business rate reserves, yeah.
Which, as we've just learned, might have some upside potential. Did you say what the amount was for that?
I've got in my head 20-something million. Is it 20? I'm trying to remember now.
Again, to be confirmed in the draft budget. but,
Okay.
Yeah,
20-something million.
in the region of it.
Yeah.
Okay. But the exact figure will be out in a week and a bit.
Correct.
Okay. Assembly Member Georgiou.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Faye, what share of the cost of the DLR extension to Thamesmead does the GLA expect to fund, and when will this be required?
Okay, so the Thamesmead project, obviously we're pleased that that was agreed, or government agreed to support that. The way obviously the business case will be published, etc. You know, when and we're still under discussion with the government in terms of heads of terms. But effectively, what will happen is that the GLA will be borrowing up front in order to drive that, as will TfL, and then we will be using support both from the government but also future revenue reserves returns from whether it's business rates or, in TfL's case, income from fares, to fund that borrowing that will have been incurred to upfront in order to build the line. So that's basically broadly the system. So the GLA, the reason why it's not in the GLA's budget as yet is because we're still agreeing the heads of terms. We've got estimates, we've got business cases we've been working through with government on terms of that. And we've got guide figures on that. But effectively, effectively what will happen is the GLA will be borrowing, there'll be a cost to that borrowing up front, but it will be funded eventually over time by business rates and contributions and seal contributions from boroughs. So eventually it'll be cost neutral over time, but obviously it's a big regen scheme, so it will take a number of years.
So that was my understanding. I think the committee's understanding as well. But of course, we got this fantastic press release, 1.5 billion from the government to fund the Thamesmead extension. But everything you've just said is basically the government deleting a line saying, actually, and including a few bits, we're not going to give you a single penny. But
we're definitely expecting government funding.
Well, hold on. What you've just said is effectively the government, via TfL, however we borrow these things, borrow the amount of money, effectively the government, it's like a Battersea-style scheme. Not completely, but, effectively we are seeking to gain revenue in the future to offset the costs of the scheme. So you're now saying there is government money. How much direct government funding are we talking about?
I don't think that's in the public domain yet, but it's a significant amount of money that we're expecting.
Correct.
Yeah. So it's a partnership. It's the TfL, the government, and GLA will all be making a contribution towards that.
Okay.
Towards that.
So.
And those heads of terms are being agreed in the spring, and the detail is quite important because the timing of that support is really important in terms of the overall funding model, for example, because you're borrowing up front. The timing of that support is quite relevant. Yeah. So there's a lot of detail still for us to go through.
I mean, that's effectively the line that we also had from the Deputy Mayor yesterday. He did initially say, the government's funding the whole thing, and then he backtracked, said, actually, no, TfL's borrowing and we're paying for some of it and this and that. So then how do we get to the 1.5 billion if the number, the net amount that we're receiving from government is not out there yet?
So
Break down those costs for me. Maybe we can work it out here.
So the 1.5 billion is the current estimated cost of building out the train line, and there's still associated costs related to infrastructure, for example, that's needed. That would be on top of that. So you need infrastructure for housing, for example. So I'm just talking about the train kind of line itself. But then, of course, what happens is you pay for that up front, and that incurs borrowing costs, and so therefore the overall scheme is more than £1.5 billion in total, and that's where the contribution from all those three parties, the government, TfL and the GLA, over a number of years, I'm not quite sure how long the scheme is, 30 years. So the train's expected to be operational in 2033, but obviously the funding system for that's way beyond that.
We're just sticking with the 1.5 billion to actually get the DLR going to Thamesmead. I'm not talking about any of the rest, the infrastructure, all of that, just literally getting that train to Thamesmead, getting that extension, and I'm only talking about the extension. There is a net government contribution, money coming from government into TfL's coffers for that, but you're not able to say what that is at the moment.
No, so I don't think that's in the public domain. I'm not sure if it will be in the draft budget or not. We might need to wait until the final heads of terms are agreed with the government and ourselves, which will be springtime.
So by agreeing heads of terms, do we know what that number actually is then?
I think we've got an in-principle commitment from them, but I think one of the challenges is the timing of the funding makes quite a big difference. Say, for example, if we get it all up front or part of it up front versus later, for example, there's a lot more detail to be agreed before we're able to share.
I mean, that doesn't sound, I leave aside the sharing point for a moment, but that doesn't sound either, and not from you, from this building saying we're getting 1.5 billion or 1.5 billion will be the net cost for the extension, leave aside the top up for the housing and all of that additional infrastructure around it. But then it sounds like, given we're still in negotiation, so we don't know what that number really is from government.
Can I just make sure that when we talk about the 1.5 billion, we're talking about the same one? The 1.5 billion phase talked about is the capital costs of the project itself.
Right.
I think you've just said the net cost to City Hall.
Oh, we're saying, no. So my point is 1.5 billion to get to get the extension to Thamesmead. That's all I'm talking about.
Correct. Yeah.
Use whatever
definition.
Fine. Capital, net capital, whatever you want to call it. That's fine.
It doesn't include the borrowing costs yet.
No.
Doesn't include the borrowing costs.
That's what I mean. It's just the capital.
So what I'm saying, I've actually left this exchange more confused than when I went into it, to be honest with you. So we've got a 1.5 billion. We don't know what the net contribution. See, they don't understand it either. That's why they're getting jumpy. So we've got the net contribution from government that we don't know what it is yet. We haven't agreed it yet. The borrowing costs are not included in this. And in addition, Faye, going back to what you said, in addition to the 1.5 billion, this could cost a lot more than we think it does. So therefore, it all seems a bit premature to therefore be talking about this, isn't it?
So we have a business case. Clear, obviously, you can imagine for a project like that, we've got a significant business case which has got a number of, around the timing of that money, for example, where those sources of funding are to support that money. So there's a robust business case already in place. The cost of the overall programme obviously exceeds 1.5 billion because you've got the borrowing cost on top of that, which will be significant over 30 years because we'll be borrowing up front. And we've had a firm commitment from the government for a significant support from towards that overall total cost of the scheme, which is in excess of 1.5 million.
A business plan don't make it real, does it? This is my point. But anyway, I'll leave it there, Mr. Chairman.
Assembly Member Desai.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I think, Faye, you mentioned that the councils the boroughs will be contributing something. So that's Newham and Greenwich.
Yeah.
And I know we're looking at the future, and following the questions from Assembly Member Georgiou about the government funding and we don't have exact idea. What sort of funding are we looking at from the two councils?
And so in terms of, I mean, I'll let maybe Alec talk about the detail, but in terms of, just to let you know, so obviously we're in active conversations with both these councils, one of, you know, and conscious of their own sort of, their own financial position and pressures in terms of that, absolutely. So we've just want to let you know that we're working really closely with all those councils on that. And in terms of their contribution, it's going to be they will still keep part of the incremental growth themselves that's been so this regeneration will free up not only business rates but housing in their areas, which they will gain income from, council tax income. And we're asking them to contribute some of the business rate increase, but not all of it. So they will still be retaining within those boroughs funding to support their own infrastructure that they will need to support these households. And all this is a live kind of conversation, but just to give you some assurance that we're working closely with these partners, we're aware of their financial positions and cognizant of that, and they will gain themselves from this regeneration. It's Newham and Greenwich who will be gaining from this position. But we are working closely with them on this particular challenge, but they're only asking support for additionality that if Thamesmead hadn't gone ahead, they wouldn't have the business rates and the council tax generated because you wouldn't be growing and building in that area. So only a proportion of that incremental support will come to us. And in the scale of the overall programme, it's that's not where the majority of the income will come from. It will be the government and from fares over time. This is less critical to the overall scheme.
Well, so 2 points here. I think from my knowledge, as someone actually who's familiar with Newham politics, much more than Greenwich politics, a lot of the building would have gone ahead regardless of the DLR. But Newham's financial position right now, if it wasn't for a very good settlement from the government, was extremely precarious. And it's not expected to improve. I mean, discussions with current Newham councillors and also people who are candidates for the council, they are very worried about the next 4 to 5 years. So I think we're just looking into the unknown here.
Yeah, no, so just to assure you, we're really cognizant of that. I chat to the CFO at Newham on a regular basis, obviously, you know, so just wanted to give you assurance, really, that we're very aware of that and we're working with them closely. Yeah. We have our own specific group that work particularly with boroughs that you lead, don't we, Elliot?
Yeah. I mean, I would just reiterate what Faye said. This is about making use of the incremental revenue which flows into the boroughs as a consequence of the development prompted by the Thamesmead extension. So it is all about what to do with the money which comes in that wouldn't have been there had there not been a DLR extension to Thamesmead.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but I do have... I'm not entirely convinced. I think, we are looking to the future, but I think there are a lot more questions to be answered.
So we're certainly happy to talk about this specifically with you separately, if that would be helpful.
Did you, sorry, I've got a number of people who want to come in, but just very quickly on the timing, did you say spring an announcement or spring an ongoing negotiation?
The heads of...
Because that would obviously clarify a lot of this hypothetical discussion, wouldn't it? I've
got in my notes, we need to, this is my understanding, whether it slips or not, I don't know, but we need to agree heads of terms for spring 2026.
Okay. Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you. So in September last year, I produced a report with the Oversight Committee, which asked for the government to consider more tax increment funding for projects exactly like this. In December, this committee produced a report having taken evidence asking for exactly the same thing. This project delivers on exactly what we have been asking for in the latter half of last year. So I fully support both in terms of the means in which this is being funded and also obviously the substantive in terms of the proposal of improving our infrastructure and housing. So clearly there are always detail obstacles to overcome with these sorts of things. But do you see hope and an opportunity to use this as a model for increasing our infrastructure and housing across the city in future years?
Yes, I mean, it makes sense when investing in infrastructure to recognise the economic benefits that pay off from that in years to come and use that as a mechanism to leverage in the initial investment. That's what this is. That's tax incremental financing that you've mentioned. And it's working well for Thamesmead, notwithstanding the details that need to be worked out that Faye's talked about. And there are other projects, I'm sure you can think of a few, where we would explore how it can be applied to those as well. It's also, important to remember what's happening in Thamesmead is quite similar to what's happened in the past at Nine Elms and other developments. So, it's building on an existing model that the GLA has applied successfully in the past. But yeah, it's an interesting development, and conversations we've gone have been constructive, and it gives us useful food for thought for future projects as well.
And I guess, will there be an opportunity to reflect once the heads of terms and the deal is done, to reflect to see how we can make sure that we can expedite this process for future opportunities?
Absolutely, we will be doing that. As you've probably identified through the work that you've done, it's incredibly challenging with housing-only projects to capture the benefit from the tax incremental benefit from that. And I think the government and ourselves recognise that's quite challenging, and so those are kind of conversations we're actively pursuing.
Thank you.
Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. I imagine by the spring could be narrowed down more closely to by the 27th of March, because that's when the pre-election period kicks in, and there'll be an opportunity to make an announcement before then. You mentioned the retention of business rates that you want to take from the boroughs, but you mentioned some, and some is always a word which sort of gets my hackles rising. How much is some?
Obviously, the business case is still, subject to his heads of terms, and we're having conversations live with those boroughs. But I'm trying to think how much I can say, really, but it's half.
Half? Yeah. Okay, so that's fair, that's equitable, that's fine. Thank you very much.
But can I just say that when I talk about that's not agreed, that's just the basis of, that's the arithmetical element at the moment in the business case, and we recognise that that's still a live conversation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Assembly Member Polanski.
Yeah, can I return to the tubes and tram freeze? So you're saying that it's coming from reserves, but we know that we don't have a mayoral decision on it yet, and at the moment that's extended to 1st of July. Is there a reason for that date? And if it's coming from reserves, can it be extended?
There's a reason why it's the 1st of July, which is linked to some kind of TfL. I think there's different points in the year than they can look at fares. So that's why it's 1st of July. There's a TfL-related reason why it's the 1st of July. As far as I'm aware, it's only till the 1st of July, and I'm not aware of any other conversations. It'll be up to the mayor if he decides to do something different from that at the point of the 1st of July.
In terms of the budget, though, is there space to extend that decision?
I think we've established today that there's there's additional funding in the settlement, and there's also reserves. So it's up to the mayor to make that decision depending on what his priorities are.
So there's a political decision to be made about how long to freeze tube and tram fares for.
I think, of course, what's good to keep in mind in that consideration of that is that there'll be an ongoing cost to that if it's maintained over time. So you've got to think about the financial sustainability, basically.
Thank you. Did you want to come in, Elliot? No.
No.
Sorry, I was misreading. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, I don't see any more indications on TfL, so that takes us on to our next theme, which is MPS and MOPAC. Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a question for Elliot. What's the impact on the 2026-27 budget of the December provisional policing settlement?
So the provisional policing settlement was quite light on detail. It gave two numbers, which was the total amount received by MOPAC in core police grant and the amount anticipated to be received by MOPAC in council tax, should the mayor choose to apply the full flexibility, which was £15 on your average Band D property. The first of those two numbers, the core police grant, is 111 higher than had been assumed in the consultation budget. The council tax flexibility, the impact of it being £15 flexibility on the average Band D property as opposed to the 3%, and apologies for cash versus percentages, but the 3% assumed in the consultation budget, the positive impact of that is worth 17.7 million. So there's your two, arithmetic impacts of the police settlement. Like I say, it was a very light on detail provisional settlement published this year. And we are still in conversation with MOPAC, the MPS and the government to understand what's going on underneath the surface of that core police grant, 11 million increase. In specific, the NIC, the NICC, and what share of that relates to the NIC. If there's any elements of that that are associated with either one-off funding or ring-fenced funding that would constrain the way that Met can use it, and those sort of conversations are still live. But just the arithmetic comparison of that number versus consultation budget is 111 million.
As part of those conversations that you're having with the government and MOPAC and everybody else, has there been any consideration given to the merits or demerits of a multi-year settlement such as we've recently received for local government? I mean, would that be of benefit to the...
we would always support multi-year certainty.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Assembly Member Hall.
Thank you. Elliot, what do you see as the most significant financial risk to the Met's 26-27 budget plans?
The Met have faced, I mean, it's a question better asked of the MPS, but the Met have faced increasing complexity in the demand of the services that they provide. And that manifests itself in, an obvious example of the manifestation of that is the protests that have increased costs that the Met have faced in the recent past. And that introduces uncertainty in their cost base, an increasing level of uncertainty in their cost base. I think that's the main risk, because, the Met have this is a gross oversimplification, but to a certain extent, the Met have a relatively simple budget in that 8% of their cost is staff-related, officers or staff. And ignoring the service impact, you can flex that up and down to get control of the finances, notwithstanding the service impact of lower police numbers. But those unpredictable levels of demand for things like protests and so on, I think is something that's out of their control and a bit of a risk. But like I say, it's a question that would be much better answered by the Met than me.
Yeah, we're just looking at the finances, which is why I pose that. I mean, I do understand their issues. Within the budget, can you remind me how much have they allowed for wage increases? What percentage?
I think it's 2%. I'll
3.
write back and confirm that, but I think it's 2%.
And do you think that's likely to be accurate?
It's a national negotiation. And,
Yeah.
it's always.
I know, because I think they put 2% in last year, which. Okay. I mean, the MPS is budgeting to maintain a stable level of police officers. Do you think that will be under risk because of the finances? I mean, they get a 111 million increase. If they lose the money that was put in for NI, I thought that was 60 million last year, but that will take a chunk out of that. And the Commissioner has said he's £260 million short anyway.
So if we think about the figures that were in the consultation budget, they had unidentified savings of 20 million, if you remember that line in the consultation budget. So it nearly balanced. In the context of a £4.5 billion budget, that's quite a small margin. So they're nearly balanced. And the funds that have come in through the settlement don't give me cause for concern that it threatens their ability to balance their budget. That budget is built on the premise of an officer number of, I think it was 31,250-ish, and that number remaining stable through the year. So I don't see any of the information that has arisen since the consultation budget jeopardising that officer workforce.
Yeah, I think, as you said, the real pressures come on all these wretched demonstrations in London, and they're costing us all a fortune. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Don't you have any other indications on policing? Just two quick things, actually, which one is one of the challenges that I think, certainly last year, that we, like during the previous year's budget round, one of the challenges we had was that we would have budgets submitted to us from MPS or MOPAC with some numbers in. We would have statements given to the public or press, or sometimes to us, by the police commissioner or possibly other senior Met officers. and those numbers didn't seem to reconcile. So some of the claims that the Commissioner was making about levels of budget pressure didn't seem to reconcile with the numbers that were being officially put in their budget. Is that a problem that you've run into? I don't want to imply that what the Commissioner was saying was not correct, but it became very difficult for us to try to understand these budget pressures that he was describing, which were often quite dramatic. And I'm conscious that there was a spending review going on at the time, didn't seem to reconcile with the numbers that we had on paper that MPS and MOPAC were giving us. Have you run into that same problem? Have you found a better way to reconcile it than we did?
I haven't, I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's an ongoing conversation through the year with the Met, isn't it, about what the pressures they're facing at any point in time might be. And that, I mean, that's the critical point, is that these published budget documents are the point in time at which they're published, based on the information available at that time. That changes over the course of the year. So when the Commissioner might come out in, early summer, around the time of the spending review, with a figure that isn't the same as the figure that was in the budget document. That's because things have changed and they're beginning their next year's budget process, and so they're flushing out the financial risks in the system that have emerged in the meantime. But then obviously, because they're going through a process, that the gap that might be referred to at that time will be chipped away at, because that's the point of the budget process, is to understand the risks and then slowly work out how to manage those risks until you get to the point where you can publish a credible, balanced budget in November. So I recognise what you're saying, that numbers would have been put in the media that aren't the same as the numbers in the published documents. But I also suggest that there's a totally reasonable understanding of how that would be the case, and there's nothing unusual or malicious about that.
Okay. I certainly was not suggesting malice. I mean, I appreciate that's a potential inference of what I might be saying, but we just found it confusing, rather than I assume when the Commissioner goes on TV and said we've got some serious problems, I assume he's not imagining them. I don't think
he's not, and he's also not saying numbers that we don't recognise from internal conversations. So.
Okay. That final point actually is quite useful. The second question actually on, so one of the issues, potential unexpected pressures, I suppose, on the police budget. Obviously, they're converting their vehicles over to electric, and the government has announced that there's now going to be this per mile charge coming in at some point on electric vehicles. Does that look like a material additional cost to the Met, do you think, or is that just a sort of small rounding error?
It's built into their capital programme.
You mean in terms of the pay per mile? No, we've had that conversation, and I think there are various types of vehicle that are exempt from it, and I've got a feeling that those vehicles, some of them.
Yeah, the Met receives some exemptions, but that hasn't come up in our conversations with the Met about financial risks.
Okay, I don't see any other indications. I think that then takes us on to the next. Oh, maybe there is an indication. Somebody member Desai.
Yeah, just the issue about the underfunding of the Met as regarding the NIC, the National and International Capital City Grant. Now, I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but I know that the government has actually given a bit more money, but not as much as the Met deserves. I think the shortfall is still considerable. So would you agree that we need to keep on campaigning that there is a case for the Met to be properly funded, or I would say fully funded? As
yeah,
in terms of the demonstrations and policing of Notting Hill Carnival, I think the demonstrations certainly must be over 11 million. That was last year, and the carnival was 7 to 10 million.
Yeah, our position on the NIC hasn't changed. At last estimate, it was underfunded to the tune of about 138 million pounds. And like I say, the provisional police settlement was light on detail, so we don't have a specific figure yet for what the NIC will be in 26-27. But we've been given no indication that it will increase on last year's figure, so it remains underfunded.
Can I just stress that the Assembly's position across parties, that regardless of who's in power, that the Met should be fully and properly funded, certainly as far as NIC is concerned?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that takes us to the end of policing. So we now move on to our final theme area for our first panel, which is London Fire Brigade. Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you very much. So on the Fire Brigade, they've currently got a £12 million deficit gap indicated in their submitted budget, and a lot of that could be put down to the modern firefighter training costs that are currently a huge contributing factor of that. Clearly, that training has been incredibly important. As we raised in the last meeting, they've currently also got a 25-year contract in terms of the training provider, which they can't get out of during this period. But how can we make sure that really important training like this is sustainable going forward? Because at the moment it seems to be something that the LFB simply can't afford.
I apologise. I don't. I think that that's a conversation that we need to have with the LFB, because it's, I'm not an expert on firefighter training programmes, but they need. It's certainly true from a financial perspective that we need to understand what their training needs are and the costs associated with that, and bake that into the base budget so that it doesn't every year create a financial gap. I agree with that.
Yeah, so I mean, originally it was paid for out of reserves, and then therefore the reserves obviously got down to a critical level now. They need to rebuild their reserves, and that it hasn't been baked into their annual revenue costs. So what work are you doing with them to make sure that is put on a sustainable footing?
So there's a lot of uncertainty, isn't there, in the fire settlement for the reasons that we discussed associated with the business rates deal that was announced last month. So I think that it's right there's a 12 million gap in the fire budget. It's right that there's a lot of pressure associated with training, which is one of the drivers of that gap. And the Commissioner, I know when he was with you recently, said that it was, from his perspective, non-negotiable to scale back the training. So it was a financial pressure they had to meet. How we square those off is something that we're going to have to tackle in the coming period. So, we will work out how much the settlement provides us in funding, work out what pressures the group budget faces, LFB and training being one of those. And when the draft budget is published, or the final draft budget in February, that will be the point at which we can answer those questions. But at the moment, the facts are the facts.
And only to say that obviously firefighter training is a key priority, really, so we recognise that.
Assembly Member Polanski.
Thank you. So the London Fire Brigade normally budgets for a 2% rise, but that's decided nationally and it's normally more. What are the options for funding a pay award greater than 2% in 2025-26?
Challenging, I think, at the moment, is what I would say, given they've already got a budget gap and low reserves. It's a conversation, as Elliot said, that would happen later, but we recognise that it's a budget risk, particularly for fire, and in particularly as their reserves are not as resilient as some of the other functioning bodies are.
Are there any other options? I know it's obviously difficult because you don't want to negotiate in public.
I'm not close enough to it to comment, other than to know that we're aware from a finance perspective that it's a risk.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Am I right that it's probably in the order of, is it 4-point-something million pounds per percentage point? Is that right? So
broadly, yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah, broadly. The rule of thumb is £4 million per percentage point increase.
Okay, so the budgeted 2, so if we assume, I don't know, what's the prevailing rate for paying boards, sort of 4% seems kind of, at least, not unreasonable. So there's probably something like an extra 9 million-ish that's got to be found. Something, obviously, we don't know. I'm not asking you to guess what it would be, but that's the order of magnitude that we're looking at.
Certainly on our risk radar that this is an area, for us to keep watching brief on.
Assembly Member Clark.
Yes, good morning. Coming to 8 Albert Embankment, obviously that was meant to be a major housing scheme, and it was not planned to be the new LFB headquarters. But with that change, what are the financial implications to the budget?
So obviously fire had to move, there was no choice in that fire had to move out of the current building. They undertook a number of options, appraisal. It's a really robust option appraisal that went through quite a lot of rigorous, because there was a challenge in terms of that, and that's how we've ended up with the outcome of it being 8 embankments. I just wanted to provide assurance that a lot of work was done on that business case. The impact, and I haven't got the exact figures for 8 embankment, but the impact on the fire brigade overall is that obviously their capital costs have gone up. There's no capital funding for fire, and so it's increased their capital financing costs. And so in the draft budget, you'll see that their capital costs go up from about 4% of their gross spend to around about 8 or 9%, 6% of their total budget over over the next 2 or 3 years. So it's not just 8 embankment, but 8 embankment is a significant part of that. So this again is obviously a financial challenge for fire to manage, because they've got obviously those capital financing costs and staffing costs, etc., on top of the whole environment that they work in terms of ensuring sufficient firefighters. So I guess is they're on our radar, but effectively the effect of the 8 embankment move, which they had to do, is that it's increased their capital financing costs. Part of that business model showed that this was the best option. Of all those different things that we looked at, it was the most cost-effective option of those things that we looked at. Unfortunately, we're in a situation where that's the effect of it. I don't think more to
Nothing to add.
Yeah.
Okay. And just sort of more generally, how will the mayor ensure that investment in LFB's estate aligns with the climate and equality objectives?
So in terms of fire, we know that they're looking at, for example, their charging infrastructure. Work's already been done on that, and I think there are proposals in the draft budget around improving starting a process of AV infrastructure. It is a challenging situation because obviously these things over time, there's a lot of fire stations to put the structure in, so it's a phased approach given their financial situation. But we're working with them, and there is already progress in that in terms of them having proposals on the table to start this in terms of EV charging.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Assemblymember Hall.
Thank you. Very quickly, 8 Albert Embankment has been an absolute nightmare for years, ever since I've been on that particular committee. Are there any estimates of the scale of the hit that the LFB budget took when the previous plans for the sale and redevelopment of Albert Embankment collapsed? Because that was a nightmare. That went on for such a long time. How much did that actually cost the brigade?
I'm not sure, because we'd have to come back.
I don't have those figures. We'll have to write that.
I assume the figures have been assembled. When things go wrong, we do an assessment, do we?
Usually we do a lessons learned of some kind. I mean, I'm not sure, so we need to check, because I wasn't here.
I know, because it has rumbled on for so long, which is why it must be a horrific figure. If you could send that to the committee, that would be very interesting and helpful. Thank you.
Thanks. Actually, just related to this as well. So I think my understanding is that March 27 is when they have to move out of Union Street. And if the plan is to move into Albert Embankment in what is now, perhaps it seemed a long time away at the end of 2025, but at the beginning of 2026, March 27 is obviously, in the world of property development, very imminent. So do you know if there is a contingency plan to...
Yes. So as part of the business case, there was an assumption that they may well need to be in a transitional arrangement or property or whatever for a period of time. I haven't got the details right. It's a little while since I've looked at the business cases. It was a few months back.
I mean, the obvious contingency would be to extend the lease in Union Street, but it sounds like that's not possible.
I'm sure that's been looked at as an option. There must be a reason why it's not possible. But we've in terms of the value for money for that, a number of options have been considered around, how to minimise those costs. And there are already those costs in the business case. But I just don't have them to hand.
Yeah, be useful. I guess if you could let us know what they are, because I think that's an obvious risk to the whole thing, isn't it? Is they end up in between, and then that obviously adds cost, and then a beautiful business plan.
I think they will end up in between somewhere, and there is a cost to that, and it's part of the business case.
Oh, I see. Sorry, so it's not a contingency; it's just part of the baseline plan that they will move out and then move again.
Correct. There's an interim solution to fill that gap.
Okay.
But even considering that additional cost, which this case that's going ahead is still the most financially, the MPV, if that's was the best.
Yeah. Okay. No, well, the Fire Brigade here, I think it was the 1st of December, they made a pretty strong case for why financially and operationally it made sense to make that into a major fire station headquarters rather than a property development. I think, unless I see any other indications, I think that is the end of our questions to our first panel. So thank you very much, Faye and Elliot, for coming and answering our questions. We will now have a short adjournment of, let's call it 9 minutes through until 11:30 while we swap over our panels. So I'll see you again in 9 minutes. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to this morning's Budget and Performance Committee and our discussion regarding the 2026-27 Greater London Authority Group budget. So I'd like to welcome now our second panel of guests. We are joined by Mary Harpley, who is the Chief Officer of the GLA, and by Charlie Hudson, who is the Director, GLA Group Collaboration, particularly looking at GLA Group Collaboration and savings. We start with Assembly Member Georgiou.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Charlie and Mary. Mary, how has the work of the GLA collaboration programme influenced the development of the 26-27 budget submissions across the GLA group?
I will provide you a headline answer, Assembly Member Georgiou, and then Charlie will come in the detail. I mean, I think as you can see from the papers, there are a whole raft of projects and programmes that are sort of promoted by the collaboration team, and those feed in different ways into the different budgets across the GLA group, whether that's through shared services, whether it's through some of the functional strategies such as the accommodation strategy, and whether it's through some of the sort of exploratory work that the collaboration team is doing. So different parts of the collaboration programme feed into different budgets across the GLA group. I don't know whether you want to add to that, Charlie.
Yeah, good morning. So, as Mary says, the collaboration portfolio is quite a jigsaw. So not each organisation is involved in every project. But broadly speaking, clearly we're going to speak here a bit about savings. But as I've talked about before, this programme delivers some financial savings, which is great, and we'll talk about those. But it also focuses on the group operating more efficiently and effectively, as well as driving that economy. That said, there are a number of financial savings. To mention a couple for colour, the work of bringing the group together around accommodation has delivered some significant financial benefits. We are cracking on a pace now with the delivery of the electric vehicle infrastructure project, so rapid chargers across GLA land. We're starting to see an income stream come in on those now. We ran a project to bring together Treasury functions, so bringing TfL together with London Treasury, which is forecast to deliver £3 million a year in net benefit. We're actually just on the cusp of getting the first annual report from that, so we'll actually have real figures rather than forecast. But there's also a body of work that looks at avoiding cost. So to give a couple of examples, we have a group-wide mentoring portal, which means that, notwithstanding the brilliant benefits of that in terms of being able to match people across the group, it's avoided each of the individual organisations buying their own infrastructure of that sort. Another example of cost avoidance would be around our collaborative procurement model, which I think we'll all be fairly familiar with now. They've got some really useful work on benefits coming through. So to give you one example, when hiring, by having a shared contract for non-permanent labour, there's a saving of about £8 million from 2021 to now, which is not insubstantial. And then, of course, there is a raft of other work that we do that doesn't drive financial benefit, but I think is really powerful nonetheless. So to mention just a couple very briefly, things like the shared service for group public health, things like the talent portal, so enabling people across the group to know what jobs are available across all of the organisations with a view to them keeping talent within our family. So, yeah, that's just a few examples.
No, thank you. Thank you both for those responses. So, Charlie and or Mary, one of the examples of collaboration staff are very much experienced over the last few years is the HR shared service with TfL. I see Mary's face, you already know where I'm going with this. And the GLAs. So the Mayor's budget submission refers to a budget realignment, aka a cost increase of 1.13 million for each of the next 3 years to roll out what appears to be a new IT platform. What's the reasoning behind this above and beyond collaboration?
So I think the figures that you are referring to in the draft budget are related to the continuing rollout of success factors. I think that's...
I'm coming on to success factors.
OK, so I think
But yes, that is the name.
Yes, I think that's the one and the same.
Yeah.
And that is part of a sort of wholesale upgrade of the systems used to support HR from payroll to recruitment and ongoing development at TfL, at the GLA, and in fact also at OPDC and at MOPAC, all of whom now share the same service. So that reflects our share, the GLA's share, of... Actually, if you're talking about the group budget, it'll be the group cost, or it'll be the GLA cost of that upgrade. And, as a group, we have to invest in these systems. What we're doing through collaboration is we're investing ultimately in fewer systems. And so for success factors, and one system for 4 of the group's organisations, which helps drive ultimately economies of scale and ultimately savings. But of course, we're having to make some significant one-off investments in the systems. So it's driven by collaborating to ensure that we are investing in a smaller set of systems, but the costs of that still fall largely to the group organisations themselves.
And are you confident there won't be any further costs beyond this realignment?
So I am confident that the costs that we've put forward in the draft budget are exactly the costs as we understand them now. And we are working hard, and in fact, this is where the collaboration team comes in. The collaboration team is supporting the objective analysis of the costs and the benefits of some of these systems. As everybody knows, the cost of technology upgrades and implementation does sometimes change. But right now, I am confident in the estimates that are in the current draft budgets. That's my honest answer.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, you haven't got a crystal ball. I appreciate that, but provided you're confident. And given the, I find it ironic that it's called success factors for the simple reason that it's taking half a decade to roll out, whilst we're seeing some budget spiral, but that's contained within the budget, so we won't get too far into it. But given the cost, given the timing, is there scope, and Charlie, I appreciate this might be more of a question for you, I mean, is there scope to sort of steady the pace? Because I appreciate your confidence, Mary, and I'm not belittling that at all, but I think when you, as we've experienced nationally and probably some local authorities within London themselves, I've been in local government for a long time, and you always see, oh, it'll cost 700 grand for this year. Oh, no, actually, it's an extra 3 and this and that, So given the time frame that we're looking at to successfully roll it out, and I appreciate it's across 4 bodies within the family, can we expedite that process to be more sure that that's what it will be? Or, is that unlikely?
So I think there are just a couple of points to make. We have already rolled out a shared service, and that's already in place. And it had its teething problems, as we know. But we at the GLA and others across the group now receive a service from a shared TfL shared service. We have to continue to invest in the systems in particular that underpin that service. And so that's what this current investment in success factors is. I just want to push back a little bit in the sense that we're still rolling out the shared service. So we already have a shared service, which took some time to implement, I accept, but is now implemented. What we're now seeing is an ongoing investment in the underpinning infrastructure for that service. And so that will continue. It'll continue in phases, forever now, at one level. Could we expedite the implementation of this next phase? I think probably the honest answer right now is no, partly because of its complexity, partly because of the lessons that we've learned from previous rollouts, which again the transformation team are instrumental in sort of recording and reminding us of. And also probably, if I'm honest, everything else that's going on in all the organisations around the group.
Yeah, I mean, I'd liken it to sort of you've bought a house that you need to do up and you're living in one room and say, oh, well, we're living in the house and we've got living in the one room. It doesn't make you happy. And I think the point that I'm just on a final question that I'm trying to get at is I appreciate your pushback and nobody is diminishing the need to invest to get it right. We're not quibbling about the numbers. I think it's just the length of the time and the potential future increase in costs. But you've expressed your confidence, and I think these additional bolt-ons will go on in perpetuity, and I don't think anybody is expecting any different. But I think it's just for the next half a decade, and call it what you want, or any of us can, but underpinning the core of the shared service, I think is an ongoing financial concern, but which I don't hear from either of you disputing that point. So I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you. Thank you both.
May I just say one final thing, Assemblymember Giorgio, which is that the collaboration portfolio aims to invest in things that will make things more efficient, effective, economic. Those things, though, from a project perspective, are completed and passed to the business. HRSS is one of those, which is why you've seen the numbers for that upgrade in the GLA budget, not in the collaboration budget, because that is now a system that is used by each of the organisations to operate their business. So from a collaboration perspective, our touch point with that now is to check in. So, for example, we do annual reviews on all projects that have come out of have gone into business as usual, to make sure that the benefits are still being realised, what they look like, how what the potential is for continuous improvement, but also to learn lessons. How can we? What would we want to do differently next time elsewhere? So that's the connection. I just wanted to kind of clarify that.
That's a good clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks. Assemblymember Hall.
Thank you. Charlie, there's 14 posts in your directorate. So what is your budget?
So the overall budget for collaboration, so the overall money available to collaboration is £8 million. And I clarified before I said budget because we operate on the basis that that is the envelope up to which we can spend on, not a target to spend.
No, of course. But does that therefore include the actual wages of staff?
Yes.
So what is that element of the budget?
The cost of the team.
The cost of the team.
It's in the order of about 1.3 million, something like that.
And that's right, 1.3 million. Gosh, okay. Thank you. So how does the GLA ensure consistent tracking and reporting of these collaboration benefits once the projects move into a more business as usual type style, particularly when you think that savings are drawn from them?
So we have a number of ways of doing that. So something that we've introduced over the last couple of years is a much more robust approach to end-to-end benefits tracking. So it's no use saying something at the start and then something else at the end and not understanding how you got there. So we have now a kind of robust process for approving a project based on a set of deliverables, benefits, and then tracking that through to the end of the project. Often those benefits are not don't come to fruition until long later because they're outcomes that need time to be realised. So we do a few things. We have annual reviews on each of the projects, which I've just mentioned that we check in on an individual level, but we also have an annual overall benefit review so that we can track where we are against where we started.
Okay, and then when they leave your hands as they were,
yeah,
how long after that do you monitor to see?
So the normal order of things is an annual review back into the board once the project has gone into full flight. There may be times that we want to do something differently based on either risk or a particular item that we want to hear about, but the general rule is an annual review point.
Okay, and is any of that accessible to any of us if we wanted to look into a specific project? How would we access that as scrutineers?
So the collaboration board papers aren't in the public domain, but if you're interested in something, we're very happy to look at sharing that. Also, once a project's in the business, it sits within the business and within the business's governance. So it might be that it reports up through a part of that organisation's normal reporting structure. So it might be that you could, I'm not sure what you're cited on in those worlds, but it's there as well.
Some of this is very interesting, and especially as you've given us the opportunity to come back and delve into more. I mean, you mentioned the talent portal. As an example, now you're not looking at any specific cost benefits for that. Does that just rumble on, or do you do an assessment on it? Because I assume it takes cost to run it. Do you?
Yeah, so the talent portal is an interesting one, actually, because it's, I just said it's the one that breaks the rule. I said everything goes into the business. The talent portal is and the mentoring portal are the two things that we hold centrally. And the reason for that is that they're a benefit for all of the group, and it's just easier for us to hold those. I mean, it could be that one of the organisations could hold those and run them.
I just wondered.
Be fine. But yes, they do have an ongoing cost. It's not, I'm happy to give you that, it's not very high. And we're also in the process of, because as you say, that it doesn't provide a financial benefit, but what it does do is give us an opportunity to retain talent within the group. However, one of the areas of improvement that we're looking at there is how we track the back end of it, because what I would like to know is, so how many people have stayed within the group because they were able to find a role in that way? And it's, won't bore you with the tricky systems issues. There are some which we're trying to get under the skin of so that we can start to report that level of granularity, because I think that's where
it's
the
important, because
lies.
it can't cost nothing to run.
No.
Okay, thank you. Mary, just wondering, after what I've heard here, what sort of wash-up was done when you removed us from the wonderful, iconic building that we were in and shoved us down here? How much has been done as a wash-up on the financial so-called benefits of that? Because there are many of us that don't think there are any financial benefits whatsoever.
So, notwithstanding the past discussion on the benefits, we haven't done a further wash-up on that since we last came to the, I think it was the Oversight Committee at our 2-year anniversary on the move to here. I mean,
Okay.
we continue to ensure that the costs that we now incur here are in line with what we thought we would incur. We do that through the budget. As we know, we're now moving to the next stage where we're going to decamp from Union Street. I caught the end of your conversation just now on the London Fire Brigade. Of course, we're decanting as well. But we have not done anything further formally on that since we were at the Oversight Committee last time, which must be coming up for a year ago.
So so you don't intend to do it anymore, because it was a mistake that I sincerely hope is never made. Well, mind you, I'd be so thrilled if you removed us from here. But, I mean, there are many of us that don't believe that the savings that were alleged to have been made were made, and that it was a financial disaster, quite frankly, with decanting people all over the place, as we are still doing, because this building isn't big enough. do we just ignore it and pretend that it wasn't a financial disaster, or do we look at it again, or do we, what do we do?
Well, so we have acknowledged before, haven't we, that there is a disagreement between our view on the savings that we have made and members of this and some other committees. I am not planning to revisit that. The savings that we made are now baked in to our budgets, and there's no getting away from the fact that we are now spending substantially less on accommodation than we were before. We will continue to draw lessons where relevant. So as we're planned the decant from Union Street to Palestra, we are obviously reviewing the lessons that we learned as we decanted from Old City Hall to here. Although, of course, the situation is very different. We're going to an existing building with a lot of notice. So we will draw lessons where we can, but we were not going to revisit the financial modelling or indeed the decision.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Actually, yeah, I've got multiple people coming in. That's okay. Just quickly on the fire brigade point. Obviously, their new plan now is that they won't redevelop Albert Embankment as a sort of property, commercial, if you like, residential development, and instead will move in as their own HQ. We have taken space in their existing HQ, but we're planning to move those people into Palestra, TfL building. Has there been any discussion about GLA use of the fire brigade, the new eventual Albert Embankment Fire Brigade HQ, or does that look like that's just adequate for their needs and there'll be no additional space available?
We are certainly not in conversation with LFB about any use by us of Albert Embankment.
Okay. Assemblymember Mahfouz, you want to come in on this bit?
Yeah, so just going back to the point about the talent pooling and obviously retaining staff and talent is incredibly important, Charlie. One of the challenges, obviously, particularly for young people, particularly in the current climate, is obviously getting into the jobs market in the first place. And apprenticeships is a great opportunity to be able to allow people to come in through that route and retain them in the future. How are we making sure that we're using the current apprenticeship levy, will be grant and skills levy going forward to ensure that that is also an opportunity that we're offering not widely within the group?
The way that we approach collaboration now is by focusing on a functional area. So rather than thinking about projects, we think about areas. So people is this area. In the people space, we have now a people board, which is made up of the chief people officers of all of the group organisations. And underneath that, they have a group of very senior officers who make it so. This means that we have fantastic places to have this sort of conversation, and that's exactly the sort of conversation they're having. It's live and ongoing, and as you'd imagine, it's quite complicated to bring apprenticeship schemes together, but it is the conversation that is being had. And even if that doesn't look like an integrated apprenticeship scheme across the group, those linkages are being made by the most senior people, which I think can only be a good thing.
Yeah, excellent. Just from experience, you can obviously, when you're young, you don't necessarily know what you want to do. You might go into one apprenticeship role, but actually you might then find out, because you've got into the GLA family, that you're far more interested in something else, or your skills are far more greatly aligned to that. So this could be a great opportunity.
Yes, and on that, and you won't necessarily see this as a project because it's something that we're kind of cogitating across the whole piece, which is how do we improve our people's understanding of the group at all, right? Because there will be some people, many people potentially, that don't know they're part of a group because they don't need to, because they're doing whatever job they're doing and they're happy in it. So I think there's a real opportunity to build in messaging about the group just in really simple ways, like inductions and that sort of thing, so that and then promoting on the back of that things like the mentoring platform and the talent portal, so people can start to see this fantastic infrastructure of organisations as a career journey, not just a job.
Really good to hear. Thank you.
Assembly Member Polanski.
Thank you very much. The MOPAC budget submission noted, this is for Charlie. The MOPAC budget submission noted that a power purchase agreement is not achievable, affordable or value for money. But how does this align with the group collaboration approach?
Thank you for the question. So there has been a great deal of work in this space over the last year. And if it's okay with you, Assembly Member Polanski, perhaps I can give an update on the project
Please.
and then come to that point specifically. So we'll remember that this is the GLA Group Clean Power project, which aims to explore clean power options, which will help the group make a contribution to net zero by 2030 and reduce the cost of energy consumption across the group. So there's three strands to this. The first is connection with TfL's work on a PPA. So obviously they're very far ahead on this. They've this year in June, last year in June, they launched their first PPA, which is fantastic. And there is a great deal of learnings that we as a group need to take from that. So that's the first kind of linkage. The second is work to support each of the GLA and the functional bodies to develop a clean power strategy. So that support is provided by the Clean Power Central team on data and insight and market understanding to support them in creating their strategies. And in order to do that, they have written a strategy for each of the organisations. I'm loath to use that phrase because it's really an options. It's a strategic options appraisal from which each of those functional bodies will then be able to write their strategy. And then the third area was the exploration of a joint venture investment model. So specifically then on the PPAs, the intention of the project originally was to seek and to investigate the opportunity of a multi-party PPA. There's been a lot of work, a lot of discussion, a lot of negotiation, and if I can try and kind of summarise that briefly, reflecting on, also reflecting on TfL's experience of implementing a PPA, is that there's a couple of issues. The first is that there's been significant market change since 2021, and that's been driven by an increased demand for renewable energy. But also, and kind of most importantly, what the market is telling us is that simplicity is where they're at, and that the more complicated we make it, the more likely there is to be a cost premium or an impact on cost. So there's been a great deal of discussion about the efficacy of continuing down the line of a multi-party PPA, and the recommendation that the team have made to the group is that rather than force everyone down this line of a multi-party PPA, we'll support those individual strategy development pieces with, as I've mentioned, a range of clean power options, and then each GLA and each functional body will select, based on that data and insight, which might be the best route to that for them. And then they will be brought together to look at across the piece to make sure that they are making enough progress in the right direction. I'm sorry, that was a bit of a long answer.
No, it was a lot of information, but I appreciated you being extensive with it. You said that the market wasn't where it's at, but the GLA is not an insignificant factor in that market. And so you said they're all going away to do their own thing and then come back together. What's the timeline for that? Because surely that would affect the market.
So the intention is to have, so the progress is well underway. A couple of already selected options that they're discussing and putting through their internal governance before it comes to the centre. But the aim is to have all of those strategies for GLA and the functional bodies by Q1 26-27, so imminent.
Great. And when you say multi-parties, we're talking about the functional bodies here?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. And are you able to detail which ones are going forward, or are they all going forward with a PPA plan?
No, they're not necessarily. It depends which option from that range each of those organisations selects. There are a couple that I know are very interested in that, but that's not. I can't I'm not able to share that just yet.
Okay, are you able to give me an example of someone that's not interested? Just I would be trying to work... No.
Because each of the organisations are looking at the options and putting it through their internal governance before. So I genuinely don't have a position for them all.
I get that. And so you say Q1 2026.
Yes.
When can the Budget Committee expect to kind of get a report back that says this is the decisions that were made?
With your agreement, I will check in with Megan Life, who's I'm not sure of her title, she leads this area. Can I check in with her and see, because do you have a touch point with that area in a different committee?
I do in the environment, but it'd be best to go through the chair, I think, in this committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Megan has actually been here, so we was it last budget cycle? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot, Gino, now. But Megan has definitely been to this committee, and so we definitely are in contact with her and her team.
Okay, and I would say that Megan is definitely more of a subject matter expert on this specifically than me.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, so I'm just looking up at any other indications before I launch into a couple of questions of my own. So one of the areas that we've looked at, we've got a shared service and a sort of group collaboration effect, is around HR and payroll. And that's not been a completely straightforward and successful service, I would say. We had, over at Audit, we had last year a really quite poor audit response, or, audit results rather. And then most recently, I'm now racking my own brain, was it October we had the audit panel meeting, which did find an adequate result, but well, it's not my position to question the auditors, but anyway, I would note that despite having an adequate result, they nevertheless had dip samples of payroll, which were somewhere in the region of a third to a half of those dip samples had problems, overpayments, underpayments, payments of amounts that couldn't be reconciled with, the list of possible levels of payment, like bonuses, for example. There was a menu of options, some of them weren't on that menu. And so all of these things sort of contribute to a general sense of a service not being run well. Obviously, some of the impact of that is staff. Well, staff usually don't complain, I suppose, when they're overpaid, although they perhaps ought to reflect on the fact that they at some point will have to pay that back, assuming it's noticed or in any way they have a duty to. Obviously, people definitely do notice when they're underpaid, or hopefully they do. And all of that sort of creates this confusing mess that chews up a lot of people's time trying to reconcile it all. So what's your assessment of how that's gone? Why? Well, I don't want you to tell me it's gone well, it's clearly gone badly. What's your assessment of why it's gone badly, and how do we, notwithstanding the fact the audit was adequate, my personal view is it's still got a long way to go to get to where it ought to be, and I assume you would agree with that. What does the path look like to get there?
Okay, thank you for that. So in talking to Assembly Member Giorgio just now, I acknowledged that the creation of that shared service has been a very bumpy ride. I do just want to restate, Assembly Member Garrett, the audit was an adequate audit in the autumn. I accept that there is still more work to do, but I think it was quite an important milestone to move to an adequate audit on payroll. We use internal audit for an objective view. I am confident that we are on a clear trajectory now of improvement and stabilising the service. There have been a lot of lessons learned in terms of implementing the shared service, which we've referred to already. The cyber incident didn't help our improvement trajectory because of some of the loss of remote access that we had, but also some of the diversion of resource and capacity to dealing with that. I mean, I think that's not an excuse, but, it is part of the picture. We have some very robust internal focus now on not only payroll, but of course that is the big one, but also recruitment, timings and outcomes and things like that. And we can see it all moving in the right direction. The other thing to say probably is that some of the challenges that we still face are, I have to say now, some of them are less about the technology, because the technology is in place and working. I mean, notwithstanding the upgrades that we're still seeking in the future, but it's also about making sure that all of us here who have a role in inputting into the system are inputting what we need to do. So, if someone is leaving or someone is arriving, the data in the system about that needs to be right. And part of what we moved to quite explicitly was a much more of a self-service model where managers are expected to take responsibility for the integrity of that data. And so quite a lot of the focus now is making sure that the right data is in place. So it has been rocky. It is very unsettling for staff when payroll isn't right, whether actually overpaid or underpaid. And we are increasingly seeing fewer issues with payroll. And, whether it's to this committee or whether it's back to oversight or another, they're very happy whenever asked to come back and perhaps give more detail about why I'm confident we are on the right trajectory.
I mean, it's correct to acknowledge that it was adequate, but as I said at audit, and so I'm not saying anything here that I didn't say there, my concern is that if you have, so there were contractors who left and for months afterwards they were still being paid. You've just sort of touched on one of the issues that came up in the audit, which is around the processes for hiring and people leaving. And as you say, the onus is on the manager. And this seems, for a large organisation, we're not a sort of, small startup with 5 people out of somebody's garage. We're a large organisation, and so the idea that we keep track properly of people starting and the start dates and people leaving and their leaving dates, and we stop paying them when they leave and we start paying them when they arrive. These are really basic things, and they are really basic things that I don't think we could hand on heart say we're definitely getting them all right all the time. And as I say, on those dip samples, it was something, there were various of them, but when audit sampled 10 payrolls at random and they find 3 or 4 of them have got a problem, as I say, this is why I challenge the idea that it's adequate, because the auditors reached the conclusion that they did, but my view is that that's not, using different terminology, that's a long way short of where we would expect to be as a well-run professional organisation. And so the question that I asked that I did note in your long answer you didn't quite get to was, when do we think we will be where we want to be? So let's say we do some dip samples of 10 or 15 payrolls, you would expect 0 or 1 out of that sort of sample size to have a problem. When do you think we'll get to that point?
Well, despite my pushback saying it was an adequate audit, of course, an adequate audit is not what I want to see anywhere. I want to see the absolute green light to all audits. I think we need to look to the next audit on payroll to be better than adequate. I mean, that's what I would say. I'm absolutely sure we'll be doing that annually, just because of, as you say, the risks involved with it, and because it's a basic function that should be right. But I'll need to check that is the plan. I would imagine it was. And in fact, I get a say on the audit plan anyway, and I would be asking them to do it again next year.
Well, as someone else who does get to feed into that, my suggestion was that we don't wait a year, that in fact we do some interim checks, because we don't really want to wait a whole year and then discover that it's still not right. I would really rather, every couple of months, I think quarterly is what I suggested.
Right.
We do a sort of quarterly check-in, because we want to see these things getting right. Because I think, the first audit a year and a bit ago, coming back, with serious problems in a new service, there's an element, I'm not sure I would agree with this, but there's an element of being able to explain that away as teething problems. But when you then go a whole other year, it's not really a teething problem.
Yeah. Well, I would certainly be up for that. We can talk to the auditors about that. I guess what I know is some of the further management and monitoring that we're now doing, including of making sure that ultimately the senior managers of this organisation are no longer seeing overpayments and underpayments in their area. I mean, we're now tracking it in that way as well, which is exactly the way we track other issues that need, in the end, knocking on the head and dealing with.
Okay, I think that's it from me. I'm looking around, I don't see any other indications, so I think that concludes our questions to our second panel. So thank you very much, Mary and Charlie, for attending. We'll have an hour short adjournment while we bring in our third panel, but thank you very much for answering our questions, and we will resume in, let's say, another 9-minute break at 20 past 12. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello and welcome back to this morning's, or now this afternoon's, Budget and Performance Committee and our discussion regarding the 2026-27 Greater London Authority Group Budget. I'd now like to welcome our third panel this morning, which consists of the return of Faye Hammond, who's still the Chief Finance Officer for the GLA, and also Tunde Olayinka, who's the Executive Director for Communities and Social Policy at the GLA, Rupinder Pahar, who's the Head of Equalities at the GLA, and Tom Rahilly, who is the Assistant Director of Communities and Social Policy at the GLA. Good afternoon, everyone. Our first question is from Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Last time we sat here, we were talking about the UK SPF and the end of the UK SPF. We've had announcements subsequently from government in terms of budget announcement around UK SPF replacement, but that was uncertain in terms of how that impacted on London. Can we just get some clarity as to where that currently stands at the moment?
So in terms of the integrated settlement, which is where that funding information comes through, there is no additional UK SPF funding. It ends at the end of this financial year, so there is no more.
Okay, so in terms of the projects that were previously being delivered under that funding stream, where do they currently sit? What does their future look like at the moment?
So there is a commitment in the GLA budget to continue an element of those. There's a £10 million growth element, and that's what resulted in part of the GLA's budget gap of 19.2 million. In terms of how that's allocated or spent, some of those conversations are still in progress, but I think what that demonstrates is the importance of growth to London, and that we recognise the value of the UK SPF and want to continue to do some of that work. And we've allocated resources to enable to do those where we think it's got the most impact.
Thank you. And in terms of some of those providers who can start to deliver on the key work that happens under that previously UK Shared Prosperity Fund projects, when are you going to be starting to go out to engage with bidders to identify what those projects will look like?
I'm not sure confident that we'll be at that process in terms of how that £10 million likely to be spent and whether that's part of that allocation. Wouldn't be able to confidently say, because at the moment we haven't agreed either the GLA's final budget, we're still at draft budget stage. It won't be until first week in March when we'll have the final published budget. So I don't think I'm in a position to say at the moment on that.
Yeah, so we're not looking to extend any of the current contracts. We're looking to start from scratch effectively in terms of bids?
At the moment, in the draft budget, of all the UKS funding, which is significant value, we've only got £10 million allocated for strategic value, which is significantly less than we've got at the moment in those allocated the project. So obviously we're only at draft budget stage at the moment, but so it's up to when we get final budget stage, we'll be able to have a better speaking with a bit more confidence about what that looks like.
Sure. I guess if I was an organisation that was currently delivering under UK SPF, and this uncertainty means that I don't know whether I'm going to be able to continue providing to the same level, to a lower level, or at any level in terms of that service going forward. And at the moment, from what you're saying, we won't be providing any clarity on that until March or April. I'm not directly talking to contractors myself. I'm not close to it, but I'm confident that officers will be having conversations with those providers through their normal, regular relationships and keeping those conversations live in terms of what some of those outcomes might look like. But I'm not close to them personally. Don't know if anyone else wants to come in.
I was just going to build on exactly that point that Faith just made. I think it's part of the normal course of the relationship of those, the management of those relationships with providers is actually to be having that kind of, honest kind of conversation about the nature of where the GLA's budget is at, what that means for kind of future arrangements. Obviously, there's particular circumstances around this year's kind of budget and the additional uncertainty, but to some extent, actually, because the GLA always has an annual budgeting cycle, many of our contracts with providers are often on an annual basis that are then, may well be renewed because work or kind of but actually there's a point of formal confirmation which that happens. So I think teams across the GLA, whether that's working on the UK SPF or other contracts, are well versed and used to those kind of relationships of annual budgeting cycles and what that means for the kind of maintenance of relationships with providers. Obviously, as you've highlighted, there is additional uncertainty in relation to the budget in general, but particularly around those UK SPF projects.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge with anything is never assume anything really. So the reality is what I've seen previously is when you've got annual settlements like this, you have zero certainty until the 11th hour or beyond the 11th hour. And what that means is that actually if you've got an amazing team that are delivering fantastic outcomes, they're going to be looking for other alternative employment opportunities because actually they want to make sure they've got certainty for themselves and be able to pay for the roof over their heads and the food on their table. So if you are going to maintain and keep any of the current projects, they need to know at an earlier stage. And when you say, Tom, that we assume that those conversations are happening and that clarity is being provided, I'm not sure how we can be doing that at the moment if we don't have that clarity ourselves.
So what I meant to is clarity around, not clarity around the future, because that clarity is not there, but clarity about actually where the stages of the different kind of discussions are at and what those potential scenarios mean for the kind of future of different areas of work. As Faye set out, that will actually, in the end, be different for different pieces of work because there is money set aside within the GLA budget that allows some of that work to continue, although it is a different quantum of money. And so there are a range of outcomes that will happen for those different projects. But I wasn't, and apologies if it came across it, suggesting that those conversations can give certainty on what those outcomes are, but they can kind of, through the nature of those relationships, help that kind of relationship with those partners kind of work because we're kind of clear about where the nature of the GLA budget is, what that means for future arrangements. I think it's also often the case that many of those partners we work with, these are important sources of kind of support, but actually they receive some, income from a range of different kind of organisations, as you've sort of indicated, and so they will have to think about how it forms part of their income base and what that means for kind of the future of their work as well.
One of the other challenges I find with this sort of budgeting is that the commissioning then doesn't then happen until partway through the year, in which case you're then trying to allocate a full year's worth of funding partway through the year and then expecting a year's worth of outcomes for maybe 6 to 9 months worth of, once the actual money's been put into their pocket. So how are you expecting this new pot, this new £10 million that we're looking to allocate to work to maximise the return?
So, I mean, all these kind of the comments that you're sharing with us today, I think I echo and completely understand some of the challenges of the sector. And so we will do as much as we can to give certainty as early as we can do. And I think that's all we can probably do at this stage. But what I would like to say is we hear exactly what you're saying. And I think Tunde and I and other colleagues will take that back to and sort of share that concern that you've echoed around certainty. Obviously, the fact that we've got a multi-year budget for the GLA is helpful, which we haven't had before in terms of providing that assurance going forward. So I think that's a positive from this year's budget process.
Absolutely, and I think it's great that we've allocated obviously this £10 million, and hopefully we'll be able to grow that in the future. Clearly, going back to the point around the sort of manifesto commitments and opportunities that arise when you have a new fund which is being created from our own funds directly, we can say exactly how we want that spent, how we want that commissioned, what sort of outcomes we're seeking to achieve. So how are we looking to make sure that we align what we commission from this new fund going forward to make sure that it meets the objectives around social integration, equality, diversity?
So much of this £10 million will be supporting work that we've already got going on, particularly that's undertaken by LNP, as opposed to sort of being a fund that can be bid against, is our current understanding. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen in the final budget, but all of our priorities are set as a GLA around our 14 delivery plans, which is what will influence or any of our thinking in terms of the final budget that we'll be allocating from the GLA.
Thank you.
Assembly Member Georgiou.
You know what, Faye and Tom, I really liked both of you until you said you agreed with Assembly Member Mahfouz on something. And you spoke highly of LNP, and you spoke highly of LNP, which is never a good thing. But anyway, we move on. Looking across the budget submissions, and this is to any of the four of you, looking across the budget submissions, how confident are you that resources are being allocated to deliver the Mayor's equality objectives?
So the Mayor's equality objectives, which were, as you know, last set out in 2022 and are due for a refresh next year because they are refreshed every 4 years, are sort of then delivered and embedded by the 14 mandates or kind of delivery plans that Faye mentioned in the kind of previous answer. And the budget sets out the resources for the kind of delivery of those. So those objectives are embedded across those delivery plans, as well as a specific objective around kind of reducing inequalities, which seeks to do two things. One is about how we support and make sure that work happens across the GLA's work, as well as kind of particular programmes to deliver on specific kind of structural inequalities faced by Londoners. So it sets up the resources to deliver those plans. In terms of the process that has then been gone through as well, we've worked very closely with finance colleagues to ensure that actually the budget guidance that kind of teams and actually across the group have received is centred on those objectives. So actually it makes both reference to actually the obligation of different members of the group in terms of the public sector equalities duty, but with reference to those particular objectives, and then support to teams to kind of make that assessment about how that is manifested through the kind of plans that are put forward.
Thank you. So, Rupinder?
Yeah, so just to add, as Tom says, the overarching cross-cutting principle that informed the mandates is one around reducing structural inequality. And then day-to-day, the way that we're kind of ensuring that they're embedded in spend is in financial governance documents, in the kind of equality comments. We encourage colleagues to refer to where that programme is delivering against the equality objectives. So as well as talking about how the programme is, reducing structural inequality, the groups that it impacts on, they would also refer to the equality objectives there.
Okay. Tunde, sorry. No, good. Thank you. And Rupinder, when is the annual equalities report for 24-25 showing performance against the Mayor's objective due to be published? Or Tunde, either one.
So we usually publish them after the annual report each year. So last year's report was published just after the summer. We would expect this year's to be published in late summer.
Okay, thank you. And I think Tom's already alluded to this, but have you or the Mayor considered adjustments to any of the objectives, particularly those outside of his direct control?
So we are in the process of refreshing the equality objectives this year. So as Tom mentioned, they were last published in 22. The statutory requirement is that they're published every 4 years. So we're actually in the process of refreshing them. We have mentioned to the Oversight Committee previously, but we could certainly share it with this group as well, that we would be kind of presenting a draft version of those objectives to the Oversight Committee for their kind of feedback and insight as well.
Okay. Now, given there is a cost attached to this, I just want to reflect on Objective 9 because, I suspect this one has probably had a lot of signposting attached to it. So Objective 9, just to refresh people's memories, is that London's workforce reflects its population is something that the Mayor of London has very little say over, and the examples given in previous equalities reports are usually standalone schemes with no mention of their success. So what's the value in an objective you can't really impact, control or even monitor properly? And wouldn't the GLA's resources be better deployed elsewhere on some of the other equalities objectives?
As members of the committee will know, there's a strong focus in the delivery plans that this budget covers around the nature of London's growth and actually how we ensure that that growth kind of benefits all Londoners, and actually that all that work kind of directly contributing to this equalities objective. So back to your previous question about how are we making sure that these equalities objectives are reflected in the plan. Those objectives are reflected in those delivery plans and those mandates. And that particular mandate around kind of ensuring that all Londoners are benefiting from London's growth and from good growth is central to the kind of delivery of that objective. And actually that is measurable in terms of what we know of the nature of kind of labour market participation, inequality within London, who is benefiting that, who is accessing, the big lever that we have obviously as an organisation is around kind of skills provision. Actually, how is that tackling particular kind of gaps in a labour market? How are we understanding those gaps, working with the providers to ensure that they can do that? And that's meaning that actually the ability to access those opportunities for employment within London are being kind of taken by all of the kind of communities and groups across London in order that kind of we're achieving that particular objective.
Yeah, just to add to that, it's worth, I think the point you made is actually sound. There's levers that we have in the GLA and the Mayor has, and there's levers that we don't have. They rest with national government and the wider sort of economic headwinds. So, as Tom said, this is really about contributing and tackling and showing what part the Mayor will utilise his budget in order to support more Londoners who are historically disadvantaged from entering the labour market and also those who are in the labour market but historically find it difficult to progress.
Yeah, I think I fully understand what you've said, Tunde, and you've given a very satisfactory response, whereas, Tom, you've actually taken my mind to exactly what I believe in the first place, where you said, I think all Londoners about 4 different times, which is exactly what I agree with personally, you know, because I think what you're effectively saying is we are doing X, Y and Z, which is to benefit the whole of London, of which we already know is a diverse population. But I think going back to both of you, in neither of your, well, Tunde, you've sort of got most of the way there. In neither of you have said specifically what X amount of money helps X group of people that have historically been disadvantaged and continue to be disadvantaged. You know, but yet I've yet to hear a response, or at least a solid example of where that funding has led to that occurrence, as I say, because in Tom, you mentioned housing and, let's say, apprenticeship schemes, I think delving more into what you've said. Well, you know, apprenticeship, housing for who? We're not Singapore. You can't allocate based on race. You know, in workforce commitments, you can't allocate, you know, you can have a diversity quota, let's say, which I know many organisations do. But, you know, can you say point X, which is X amount of money, has been committed on Objective 9 and has delivered this result?
So just before Tom comes in, certainly we have a mandate, a programme called Supporting Londoners to Benefit from Growth, which is, you will know from before, is the evolution of our employment and skills programme. That has specific focus on looking at those who are disadvantaged and ensuring that they get the skills and the employment support within our remit in order to make it more likely that they will be able to get jobs and get economic job income-related outcomes within the labour market. Again, it's not. We haven't got the figures here because we ensure we're stewards of the objectives. Those objectives are actually delivered by that team, but we are happy. We will be happy to write to you on how that money is allocated and the measures that we put in place to ensure disabled Londoners in some of the industries like construction, how we ensure that there's more female representation and other groups that are disadvantaged.
Yeah, I think actually that would be helpful. Just against the, you know, I've given Objective 9 as an example, but against the various objectives, excuse me, X amount spent per objective. I know you can't break it down the way, but if you possibly could, because you have already alluded to various schemes where money has gone into on an individual basis, right? And these are the positive outcomes as you see them. I think that would be helpful.
Sure.
Tom, I don't know if you had... Yeah.
I was going to make actually a very similar point about under the specific mandate of supporting Londoners to benefit from growth. There are a range of programmes that have different focuses within them about different groups who are excluded from the labour market in different ways. Whether, you know, Tunde talked about work to support disabled Londoners into employment, particular work around kind of women from minority and ethnic communities into employment, and both work for them as individuals and the skills that they need and can acquire, but also the work with employers and what that means to kind of changes in employment practice and removing the kind of barriers that are kind of seen in employment. And then say, we probably don't have the time to cover them here, but that mandate contains a range of different programmes that are trying to seek different outcomes and objectives in relation to kind of different barriers that different Londoners face. So that's the detail we could set out for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Assembly Member Polanski.
Thank you. I don't mind who answers, but the Met's budget references the new Met for London Phase 2 and the London Fire Commission is delivering a culture transformation programme. Are you tracking how investment in these programmes is working and how they're improving outcomes for London? I don't know if, Tom, that picks up on what you were just saying. No, Ravinda, thank you.
So obviously, because that work is delivered by functional bodies, they kind of do those assessments themselves. However, we do provide overarching support to all functional bodies in being able to assess the kind of equality impact of their work. So some of the work that we did this year ahead of, or rather at the end of last year, at the head of the consultation budget being published, is my team worked directly with the leads in each functional body to conduct a high-level equality impact assessment of the work that they're doing. They have the statements within each functional body, and we'll have a summary of that that's provided in the final budget. So I know for the Met, the transformation, the new Met for London work was incorporated within that equality assessment. And sorry, the second thing that you mentioned, the London Fire.
London Fire Commissioner.
Yes, so there were specific components of their work that they referenced, particularly looking at how are these programmes improving kind of participation and support for groups of protected characteristics, and also where there's any kind of cost savings or increased expenditure, what they're anticipating the impact would be. I don't have that, the kind of granular detail to hand, but I'm really happy to kind of take that away if that's helpful.
That'd be great if you're happy to write to the chair with it. I think I've got Tom, and I don't know if that's you signalling. No, sorry, Tom.
It was just to add to that whilst Rupinder and the team have provided that sort of overall support for the process and have worked very closely with Elliot in terms of what that means for the kind of... Obviously, you'll be aware that those are organisations that, as legal entities, have those responsibilities in relation to the public sector equality issue in their own right. And so ultimately that accountability for how they are meeting that duty and, the delivery of their kind of plans sits with the Met, sits with the London Fire Commissioner, rather than kind of sitting with the GLA. So there's a sort of hybrid scenario here, I think, where the team has worked, actually the nature of the expertise that exists in different members of the GLA group varies in accordance to their size, essentially, but the team has therefore kind of worked very much in the fashion of the kind of collaboration session that we just had, in nature of actually how are we working as a group to ensure that we've got equalities processes built into the budget process, but actually some of the then responsibility, obviously the responsibility for delivery and accountability of that will sit with the Met or the kind of the London Fire Commissioner, rather than being accountable to the GLA in that sense.
I mostly agree, but there is some shared accountability, right? As in, if the investment is going there, then that's exactly why Rupinder said they're giving a report and you're checking that the money is being well spent.
So in terms of financial accountability, Faye might want to come in. But yes, of course, financial accountability is there.
So in terms of the expenditure, then that's all covered through, we have regular quarterly briefing meetings on the budget position of all of our functioning bodies and how that's being spent. So that's part of our regular cycle of work.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Actually, Rupinder, you were talking about looking at groups with protected characteristics. But surely the way protected characteristics work is that everyone has protected characteristics. So everyone has an age, everyone has a sex, everyone has a sexuality. So I'm not quite sure what you meant by that.
You're exactly right. So the benefit of the Equality Act is it can actually cover everyone, but we need to be able to assess, we need to demonstrate that we have considered each of those groups in turn. So exactly as you say, everyone is generally covered by protected characteristics. That's kind of the point of the Equality Act, that it covers everybody. But you would need to set that out in an equality impact assessment. So you would have a category for each of those protected characteristics to say, we know that this programme, for instance, impacts disproportionately on older people or young people, and this is a benefit that it has been assessed to have had over the last year, and this is what we're anticipating that it will do over the coming year. It also allows you to identify where the programme isn't necessarily kind of targeting any of those groups, and that's something that you could explore over the year ahead.
Okay, understood. Assemblymember Hall.
Thank you. I think this is the last question, Chairman, so it's rather nice that we're finishing on the Mayor's Loved and Wanted campaign. So this is down to you, Rupinder. So this was launched, I think, on Valentine's Day, wasn't it, last year? Oh. Lovely. And it's got nearly £1 million in funding. So tell me, how do you identify people that are not feeling wanted or loved? Rupinder, this is, please. I think you're in charge of it. Are you? You're not. Are you in charge of this, Tom?
The Loved and Wanted campaign is a campaign that is run primarily, we'll start it off within our kind of strategy and communications colleagues, so it's not the responsibility of anyone on the panel. Within communities and social policy, we are responsible for an element of the programme that is about working with community organisations across London. So there was a Loved and Wanted fund to support on-the-ground activity that was launched in autumn last year, and the recipients of which will be announced in February this year. So it's a fund, it's a programme of work that actually has different aspects of delivering different areas of the GLA's work, but its primary owner is within strategy and communications.
So who would decide? There's nearly £1 million in it. So who then, which officer would decide where that funding goes?
So I think your original question, and please come back if I misunderstood it, was around where's the focus of the campaign. The campaign itself is actually designed to be a universal campaign about how all Londoners are loved and wanted in London. It then has a number of elements that are kind of focused on what that means for different communities and actually how we are at different as you say, the campaign has now been running for a year. What that means through at different periods of time to reflect different communities within London. That has had a focus on the kind of impact on support for frontline workers within London. It's had an impact on LGBTQI+ communities. There's been lots of work around kind of support for migrant communities. So it has had different target communities and different areas of focus during the course of the work.
Okay, so who decides where it specifically goes in? I'm trying to get to who holds the budget then? Is it within the community, the communications?
I think the budget that you're referring to sits with the Executive Director for Community.
Sits with who?
Strategy, the Executive Director for Strategy and Communications.
Can I just check? So you're asking, there's obviously this fund that I'm not close to, and there's a number of decisions that are made. So you're looking for clarity on who makes those decisions.
Well, I am really, because it's nearly £1 million.
Yeah. So
it's coming out the GLA. I was told that Rupinder was responsible for it. Fair enough, she's not. But there's £1 million here of taxpayers' money. I would love to know how we decide who needs to be loved and wanted. I'd love to know who holds that budget. Yes.
So apologies.
He does, as an example, and I'm sure he does.
The campaign is, because it is a cross-cutting campaign and peak programme of work across the organisation, the campaign leadership and coordination sits within Strategy and Communications. So ultimately, the responsibility sits with the Executive Director for Strategy and Communications.
There's a grant programme that sits with us that you might want to talk to. And correct me if I'm wrong, I sense that you're asking what's the evidence base as to who this should target?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's £1 million, Tunde. It's not like 10 and 6. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, and I know that's aged me, 10 and 6, but it's a lot of money. Loved and wanted, great, but it's £1 million. And I'm trying to get to the bottom of who decides who is loved and wanted. What part of it do you have then, Tunde?
So there is, the part that we administer is a grant programme to community organisations that can support the aims of the Loved and Wanted programme, which my colleagues can talk to more as they're closer to the detail. The evidence base is quite broad. We know that race-related hate crime has risen since 2010. We know that religion-based hate crime has risen since 2010. We know transgender-based hate crime has risen. So this is a response, I guess, to a trend that we are seeing. And I think the Mayor has made the decision that we want to make a contribution to showing that London is a place where we are against hate-based crime, so that all communities, no matter what their background, no matter what their characteristics, can feel safe and feel that they can contribute and benefit from London.
Yeah, I was trying to get some answers from people that hold this budget.
Sure.
Let's take Jewish community.
Yeah.
My heart goes out to them. I've got friends that are really frightened now. So how would somebody decide to put money to make them feel more wanted and loved, although you'd have to go some at the moment? So where would that sit? Who does that sit with?
So apologies if I've not communicated. The budget that you are referring to sits with the Executive Director for Communities and for Strategy and Communications. In terms of your question about how the choices are informed, as Tunde said, there are a range of metrics, there's a range of data that's used, and there's a survey that's used by both the government but also the GLA, which is called the Community Life Survey. It's a survey that's held nationally by DCMS. It's also informed by an extensive range of engagement with a broad array of communities across London. So. Assemblyman Hall, you mentioned Jewish communities. Actually, as part of the development and as part of the kind of identification of the focus of the programme, there's been an extensive range of engagement with a whole range of faith communities across London. There is a meeting with Sikh leaders taking place today. Those equivalent meetings with Jewish leaders, interfaith leaders, bringing kind of leaders of faith across different communities have all come together. a lot of those discussions over the course of kind of recent months have focused on the nature of kind of social cohesion challenges in London and what they would like to see represented in the Mayor's Loved and Wanted Fund. So actually, in terms of the focus, yes, there are obviously, ultimately, there are decision makers in the GLA about what the nature of that campaign is. That decision is informed by quite extensive engagement with communities across London and the breadth of those communities. There's been kind of engagement with VCS partners, with business partners, with faith communities, with community groups across London to shape the nature of what the focus of the Loved and Wanted programme is. And therefore, over the course of the year of the work and the programme to date, it has seen a range of different focuses reflecting the insight that we have gained through that piece of work, reflecting the concerns that we've heard from communities in that engagement, and reflecting what the data tells us about, the sense of belonging, the sense of trust. There is a measure within the Community Life Survey around the nature of kind of my kind of relationships within my community, trust of others within my community. And it is that broad suite of both qualitative and quantitative information that is informing the decisions that officers are able to take about the nature of the Loved and Wanted campaign.
But those officers don't sit within the integration departments. No. They don't sit anywhere near any of you.
So, no, it's, as I sort of said earlier, it's a cross-cutting piece of work within the GLA. There are contributions from teams and units across the GLA into the nature of the programme. It does not sit wholly within one.
So
in terms of the budget,
who completely oversees it then?
So
bearing in mind this is going to communities.
So it is a programme of work because of its cross-cutting nature that is coordinated, and the budget, the main budget for the programme is held within strategy and communications with contributions from the Communities and Social Policy unit and units across the GLA, and there are officer working groups that help shape that work and make those decisions, but that is where the coordination sits.
Well, I'll keep my thoughts on that to myself, but is it likely to have more funding next year? Do you know that? Bearing in mind this is the Budget Committee, do we know if more money is going to go into this Loved and Wanted campaign?
Well, the Mayor hasn't indicated that it won't, but we're still, I think the final budget is still being discussed. I think Faye may want to say more about that, but we're still in the midst of deciding, or the Mayor is still in the midst of deciding what his priorities are.
Okay. Faye, is there anywhere I can look up where this money has gone, which groups it's gone to? Because word salad comes to mind. It's just all over the place. It's £1 million. Where do I find out? Because our job is to scrutinise. Where do I find out where that £1 million has gone?
I've made myself a note to come back to you on that, because I think that in our current budget, the way that we do budget reporting, I don't think that there's something that transparently reports that enables you to do that. So I think I'll need to come back to you specifically with that information, with that particular heading in terms of that particular budget line.
Well, yes, please, because actually, if we start looking at the amount of money that goes to outside organisations, fine. But we have got to be able to look at that and say, OK, this organisation, Organisation X, has had £1 million from this and 100,000 from that. We need to see what's going where and who is actually monitoring the benefits of taxpayers' money going to these organisations, because so often this money just goes up into the ether. He's given out, randomly. Loved and Wanted campaign. It's given out randomly and we never know, and nobody takes responsibility for it. So if you could actually get us a summary of where the money has gone, Faye, please, at £1 million, and whether, as soon as you know, whether it's going even more money into the Loved and Wanted campaign, I'd be very grateful.
Yes, I'm certainly happy to do that. As each grant's given out, there will have been public reports on it. What I don't have in front of me is an understanding. Sorry, Tunde, you wanted to?
Yeah, actually, it was just building on what you say. Part of our quarterly reporting process will actually highlight some of the information that you want in terms of reducing inequalities and the Loved and Wanted campaign. Part of the Loved and Wanted campaign's work was about creating a network of safe spaces, which Tom spoke to earlier, that different groups would have helped us would have inputted into the design of the programme. So there are some KPIs attached to it, which we will be able to let you know about.
I'd be very interested to see the KPIs. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, as it turns out, that wasn't quite our last question. I now have half the committee wanting to ask further questions on this point, and we have 6 minutes remaining. Assembly Member Desai.
Thank you. Well, my question was actually going to be along the lines of what Susan asked for, in terms of how does the programme reach out to meet the concerns of London's Jewish community. That has been answered, but, well, not really. But I'll take a step further. I'll come into the question, Chair, and I'll make the point in passing that being cohesive and being integrated are two very different things. But that's a debate for another time. So in terms of say, London's Jewish community, the way I look at it, we are one community comprised of many different communities, but should have shared values, which was what makes us, Londoners with a British Indian background or whatever. How does the programme reach out to make other Londoners aware of the concerns, not just aware of the concerns, but take on both those concerns that London's Jewish community has? And I should also say that words like cross-cutting, all that, don't mean nothing to the people out there. I was a council for 20 years. I've seen what I call the race relations industry at a very close range. And it's about lots of reports being exchanged here and there, but with very little impact on the ground and bringing people together.
I'll come in first just before Tom. I think these are, I'm glad this has sparked debate and I can see hands going up because this is really important and goes to the heart of the Mayor's strategy on this. Just taking a step back, just to give this context, when we were looking at what are now called the London level outcomes, which were the sort of 14 outcomes that we are, the outcomes behind all of the mandates, one of the outcomes that we identified were Londoners get on with each other and support each other, which sounds quite fluffy, but this programme, or Loved and Wanted, is really supposed to be and aims to be the crystallisation of that. So in answer to your question, how do we ensure that all Londoners understand the experiences of other Londoners? There are parts of this work which is about information sharing and bringing different communities together, which will be highlighted in several parts of the programme. So I guess what I'm saying is that it's...
I don't question the programme. I think it's an important programme. But the question is, I'm looking at the results on the ground. Is it working?
That's right. The grant programme has just started, but I'll let my colleague come in.
The programme that Tunde was referring to is there was a specific grant programme for community organisations which was launched as a grant programme last autumn and has gone through to answer Assembly Member Hall's question earlier in terms of how the money allocated. Quite a rigorous two-stage application process where we received applications for over 420 organisations. So that process has taken the right amount of time to do the due diligence on who those organisations were, but also the nature of the kind of communities that they are supporting. So actually that element hasn't started yet. It's due to be launched hopefully in February this year after that two-stage kind of application process has ended, I think is the specific programme that Tunde was referring to. But actually I was previously going to make the point that I think Tunde has largely covered. The programme itself builds on quite a long kind of history of work around kind of social integration and the kind of Mayor's programmes for that, which, as I'm sure committee members are aware, has at its heart a definition of kind of social integration and social cohesion that is about the relationships between different communities within London, and it is something that is a shared responsibility of all London communities. And actually, good cohesion and good integration is fostered by building the bridges and the relationships between those communities. That requires opportunities to do that. That requires opportunities for individuals and communities to participate, and it requires us to kind of tackle some of the nature of kind of structural inequality. So to your question, I think both the grant programme, which will kind of launch in coming months, is seeking to do both of those things. It's seeking to think, actually, what's the specific support that different communities need that enable them to participate, but it has a particular focus on activities that are about bringing communities together and bringing different communities together to build those shared the experiences, those relationships. So then when we go back to actually the ways in which this is measured and the metrics that are used, actually there are quantitative surveys that have those measures, but actually what do we know about the nature of trust and the strength of relationships between different communities in different parts of London?
Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you. So just to clarify, so £900,000 of that £1 million is part of this grant, which hasn't been allocated yet, and so the answers to the questions that have been asked, the answers don't exist yet, but they will be published next month. You've gone through due process with those bidders who obviously then need to produce reports to show what they've achieved as part of that funding, and also a report annually as part of their due diligence themselves, whether they're a charity or a company, through their annual reports as to what funding streams they've received and what that's been allocated. Am I correct in assuming all of those things? It's just a yes or a no.
Yes, you are.
Yes, thank you. And in terms of the £100,000 that's remaining, because part of the campaign that we've seen so far has been very much the posters, communication and strategy stuff. Is that been £100,000, or is that been £100,000, or is that been going to other things as well?
I think we'd have to come back to you with this precise detail on the kind of amount spent on the campaign so far.
Thank you very much.
And yes, I think you've just committed to do a detailed breakdown on that. Hold on. Okay. We're all getting very excited about being loved and wanted. I had... Hold on. There was a couple of quick final things. So, Tunde, you were here in November, and I'm sure you'll remember that you made 3 commitments. So I'm just going to remind you of what those were, because you have not yet got back to us. So 2 of them were in relation to reducing inequalities programme, what the programme will deliver, how spending is being monitored, and where KPIs for the project can be found. And secondly, related also to the Reducing Inequalities programme, was a breakdown year by year of the £84 million allocated to projects across the Reducing Inequalities programme.
So, yes.
So I'm not asking you to do those right now. I don't imagine...
We probably can, actually, in terms of the... I just want to clarify something. I said, and I probably said it very clumsily, that there's 84 million that Londoners benefit from. That's actually about benefits entitlement. So we have a programme that tells Londoners, or it helps Londoners of low income understand what benefits they're entitled to, including pension credit uptake. That has put £84 million into their pocket, rather than the GLA has...
Understood.
Yeah.
I think what we were asking for was a demonstration of that figure that was being claimed. I think that was what you had agreed to do. And then the third thing was information about... on how much the GLA's apprenticeship levy is currently used as a percentage of the levy that we're paying.
So I believe that we sent that information. I'll just double check with the team to see if we've...
the person that when you send it, the person that it gets sent to is sitting next to me, and the information I have is that we haven't had it, but maybe it's somewhere working its way through.
Maybe it's in my outbox somewhere. Sorry.
Chair, I was just saying, Chair, we can follow up with committee services after, because the letter was sent on the 12th of December. I have a copy in front of myself, but we can double check why it's got lost in the process.
Okay. Well, apologies in that case for putting you on the spot about something you had done. The other thing I just wanted to very quickly ask, while we're just on the topic of equalities here. So obviously one of the big bits of news with equalities this year has been the For Women Scotland versus Scottish Ministers judgment, specifically relating to the definition of sex within the Equalities Act. I wondered, obviously there's been quite a lot of, let's say, discussion after the Supreme Court decision. What's the GLA's position on that, and has that had any impact on the work that we're doing in this area? You nodding? Tom.
Just speaking broadly, the committee will be aware that obviously following that judgment, the government are yet to finalise the kind of statutory guidance. So actually, in terms of kind of how the issue is being dealt with across the GLA and GLA group, it is necessarily largely on a kind of case-by-case basis. We're aware kind of teams think their issue. The team's been supported to kind of get necessarily kind of legal advice on that. In terms of kind of wholesale kind of revision to GLA policies, they haven't yet changed, and that work yet hasn't taken place because it needs to do so following the kind of publication of the government's statutory guidance, which is still yet to be done and is forthcoming.
I'm not clear. Sorry, Rupinder.
I was just going to add, so the GLA group submitted a response to the HRC consultation on the updated code of practice in the summer, and we highlighted concerns about the resourcing that's available to make any necessary changes and the impact it may have on services that we offer to Londoners. So it kind of reiterated across the GLA group that we would want to have assurances that that can be properly kind of resourced, that we would have the support to make those decisions through the kind of official guidance.
What is it the official guidance might clarify that wasn't clear from the judgment?
It goes into quite a lot of really specific detail. So if you are a service provider of particular, things like public toilets or direct delivery services, there's really specific guidance on how you would assess whether somebody is kind of able to access that service and the evidence that you would use to assess that.
Does the decision not just conclude that man means biological man, woman means biological woman, a trans woman is a man for the purposes of the Equality Act? Is it not extremely clear? I'm not sure
The
what's
judgment
unclear.
says that.
Yeah.
The way that you interpret that as a public authority without falling foul of the law is quite complex.
But that is the law, though. I'm not quite sure. I'm not.
I can send the updated code of practice, which is quite long and detailed, to the chair, and you can go through it yourself and understand better how it works.
Okay, thank you. I remain puzzled, so perhaps I'll have a look at that. Apologies, we are now very much over time. So can I thank our third panel? Thank you very much for attending and answering our questions. We do have a couple of little bits of housekeeping to wrap up, but you're free to wrap up the meeting, but you're free to leave. Thank you very much. So can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion? Can we also delegate authority to me as chairman in consultation with the party group lead members to agree any output arising from the meeting?
Agreed.
Can I ask the committee to note the mayor's decision lists for the periods 29th of August to the 25th of September 2025, 26th of September to the 6th of November 2025, and the 7th of November to the 4th of December 2025, and decide whether to highlight any issues for detailed consideration? Good. Can we note the committee's work programme and meeting dates? The next meeting of the committee will be held on the 26th of January 2026, 10 a.m. here in the chamber at City Hall. I have no urgent business today, so that concludes today's meeting. Thanks, everyone.